it's fallen to them on this occasion to form the senior party of the Sovereign's escort, and I'm sure they're very happy and proud of that. And they're followed, of course, by the Lifeguards, who are actually the senior regiment founded in 1660. The Duke of Kent seated there with his hat, which has a almost tartan-like band upon it. That's because he's the Colonel of the Scots Guards, who are also processing today.
And, of course, the Duke of Kent, he served in the Scots Greys, which was another famous mounted regiment of the British Army. Their charge at the Battle of Waterloo, an ill-fated charge, but a very gallant one, is remembered in portraiture, photographs and artists' impressions for ever since. Not photographs, because that didn't come in later, but artists' impressions of what went on. And he's there, had ridden very, very many times in the trooping, but not now. He's getting old, but he's still there. And as I said earlier, he has a wonderful voice. And if ever you have the chance to hear him speak, it's a treat.
And still serves as Grand Master of the Freemasons.
Yes, well, there's always been a member of the royal family near the very top of the Freemasonry in this country, going back many centuries.
OK, coming in now, good afternoon to you. This is Martin Daubney. I'll be here for the next 3 hours, and of course, for the final hour of this epic pomp and ceremony. What a fantastic spectacle we're seeing here. And the weather's great. Not too hot, though, gentlemen. Because I was fearing, like we saw earlier in the week, we might be getting a few of these guys getting sunstroke. But it's actually beautiful out there, not too hot, lovely crowd, and what a fantastic day so far.
Been a huge blessing that it hasn't been fiercely hot, because very, very uncomfortable. And I know the King doesn't like to be too hot too, and it's quite an ordeal for him as well. Obviously, he wants to make sure the first trooping as King goes smoothly. There we see the King's Troop of Royal Horse Artillery going by, all skilled horsemen. Very many of them join the army after being jockeys and perhaps failing in that profession. They come in and they serve with great distinction at ceremonial occasions, firing the salutes around London. And of course, in the summertime, they do also give displays elsewhere in the country and abroad.
And you'll note that they were taking the salute with their whip hand, so the whip's pointed down, and that's a unique way that if you're on a horse, you can take a salute when you are performing that complicated role.
And so, for the benefit of those who just joined the show, gentlemen, at what stage of proceedings are we at now, building up to that dramatic fly past expected around 1 p.m?
Yes, we're coming towards the end of this trooping ceremony now, as we have the great last march pasts of the household divisions, the mounted regiments and the foot guards and the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, who will then form up around the Sovereign to form the Sovereign's escort and then lead the royal party back down the Mall from whence they came to Buckingham Palace, where there'll be a small intermission whilst the refreshments are taken on board by everyone, who I'm sure is very hot and dusty after the day out at Horse Guards Parade. And then we'll have that great fly past at 1 o'clock, which will see a whole range of planes from the Second World War Battle of Britain Memorial flight up to the latest times when we're going to have the fastest royal jet ever to be commissioned. The Envoy 4 will be on display, as well, touchingly, as the plane that carried Her late Majesty down to London just a few months ago.
And Michael, that'll be a spectacular display, because, of course, we had a much scaled-back fly past, didn't we, during the coronation due to inclement weather?
It was helicopters only. Helicopters only because the low cloud, the RAF and, of course, the Army Air Corps were involved as well, and the Royal Navy. They're all terribly disappointed about it, but I've heard some of the interviews with the man who's in command, and they are looking forward to this, and it will be a superb fly past. We're seeing the mounted band of the Household Cavalry now moving off. We've watched the Blues and Royals, so-called because of their blue tunics, followed by the Lifeguards in their red tunics. There they are, going back from Horse Guards towards Buckingham Palace. It's been a great day. I think it's been a blessing Martin, that it hasn't been fiercely hot. I haven't noticed any casualties. I haven't noticed anybody falling out of line. And I'm quite sure the King has welcomed that too. He doesn't like very hot temperatures. And it's an ordeal for him to make sure everything is perfect. On his first occasion, obviously he's done it many, many times when he was Prince of Wales, but this is the first time as king. And that's something special. It's the first time in nearly 3/4 of a century that we've had a king taking the salute.
Yeah, and Rafe, it's the case that Prince Charles is the first monarch to go on horseback in some time.
Since 1986, that's what the Queen has been was noted for taking part always on horseback. The first Queen to wear the uniform of the Guards Regiment. Queen Victoria only attended one trooping the colour in 1895, and that was at Windsor Castle, whereas Her Majesty attended every single year of her reign, except for 1955, when it was a train strike that prevented her from attending. I'm sure people today can feel some sympathy for that. And now, of course, we have the King becoming the first king since 1950, in fact, to take the salute at trooping the colour. So it's a trooping the colour of many firsts, and it's the first time for 30 years that we've had all the regiments taking part in the ceremony as well.
I was there in the first year the Queen came in a carriage, this rather dinky little Victorian carriage, rather sweet. I think we called it the Queen's go-kart, and she looked very good in it, and she just embraced change. She always embraced change. She didn't fight against it. She realised she'd had Burmese all those years, the horse provided by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Well, I better stop now for the national anthem. Everybody's going to relax. It more or less means that everything has gone off smoothly, and the principals will now start to depart from Horse Guards down the Mall back to Buckingham Palace for the balcony appearance. Everybody, I think, there can congratulate themselves and say how well it has gone, because it has gone extraordinarily well. It's been a feat of precision, of musicality, of great expertise. Not easy. Think of that, controlling all those horses, making sure everything went perfectly. Well, but it has gone perfectly.
Virtually every trooping has had at least one stray horse that's decided to have its own parade. And on this occasion, it's been wonderful to see that actually everything seems to have fallen together perfectly without any upset whatsoever.
There we see the Princess of Wales, Kate, looking absolutely beautiful in that. I'm not quite sure. I haven't got the vocabulary to tell you what sort of green it is, but a sort of beautiful green.
An emerald green.
An emerald green, yes, we'll settle for that. And, of course, the Queen carrying off this militarised costume, coat, which is obviously a tribute to the Grenadier Guards, of which she is the colonel. I think she gets away with it. It's reminiscent of the outfit that the Queen wore for all those years when riding Burmese. I was there, as I say, when the Queen had to give up riding her horse, and a little bit later the horse was retired. He was kept at a police barracks in Pimlico. So I went down to film the horse. It was just before Christmas, and it was, shall I say, a tailpiece for the news. So I waited for all the other cameras to go, and then when we were there alone, I got some tinsel out, and we decorated Burmese with some lovely Christmas tinsel. And it made a lovely end for the news. Now that horse, as I say, provided by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as has been the King's horse, Noble, all the way from Regina in Canada.
Superb anecdote there. We're going to cut across now to Cameron Walker. So, Cameron, we've just had the national anthem. What's the itinerary for the rest of the parade?
What we're seeing now on our screens is what's called the march off. So the field officer in brigade waiting has informed His Majesty that his guards are ready to march off. His Majesty has now given his permission for them to do so, as you can see on your screens. And the field officer withdraws. The guards form division in 6 ranks and close up together as the mounted troops leave the parade, and His Majesty will be flanked by the other royal colonels, so the Prince of Wales, Princess Royal and Duke of Edinburgh, and moves to the head of his guards for the procession along the Mall, and then of course back to Buckingham Palace, preceded by the household cavalry, the massed bands led by the royal procession along the Mall, and streetliners, of course, who have been waiting very patiently along the Mall, looking at the hundreds of people in the crowds who have gathered waiting for the royal family to come back to Buckingham Palace. They'll be giving a royal salute as His Majesty passes, and once His Majesty and the guards have departed Horse Guards parades, the colour points march off, signifying the end of the parade and at Horse Guards. But of course we've got a lot more to come, because we have the march past at Buckingham Palace, balcony appearances with, we're hoping perhaps, working members of the royal family, although that's not been confirmed by Buckingham Palace. Usually for trooping the colour, when the late Queen was on the throne, it was extended family members, but last year that changed to just working members of the royal family, perhaps to spare Harry and Meghan's blushes. We are perhaps expecting that to happen again this year, but we'll have to wait and see exactly who appears on the balcony before the flypast at 1 o'clock. A magnificent extended flypast, 70 aircraft expected to take part from all three armed forces, the British Army, Royal Air Force and Royal Navy as well. We're expecting Battle of Britain memorial flights to take part, so expect to see Spitfires, Hurricanes, and we are expecting a grand finale with the Red Arrows. And if you look at the weather, it's not actually been too hot. Unlike the rehearsal last week even, with the Prince of Wales taking the royal salute, where at least 3 of the foot soldiers fainted in the sweltering heat, to be frank. This year, I don't think we have had any casualties on the parade ground, so it seems to be pretty successful from the military's perspective. It is warm, but not unbearable, although I would not want to be wearing a bearskin hat at this moment in time, or bearskin cap, I should say.
We've just seen there the commander of the parade salute the Princess of Wales and Her Majesty Queen Camilla. He's done his job, he's trotting away. I think he can be very satisfied. A lonely man in the middle of tumult, really. I mean, a huge crowd we've seen. We've seen a beautifully, brilliantly ordered military parade, musicianship of a very high order, and precision under pressure, because this is a tremendous amount of pressure for these young guardsmen to get it absolutely right. No matter how much rehearsal, no matter how much practice you do, it has to be right on the day. And I think it has been right. I think if you're scoring this one, this is definitely 10 out of 10 and a gold star. And I'm sure that they will actually, when they're having their refreshments, be saying exactly that, how good it has been, how well it's been done. And now we're seeing on the screen, if you're listening on the radio, the carriages forming up to take the royal personages who are not on horseback back to Buckingham Palace ahead of the King's procession finally back to his palace.
And it must be said, you know, the pressure really was on for the first trooping of the King's reign to be as good as it possibly could be. And so all the elements have come together. The precision of the troops, the weather, everything has come into great form. And we should also salute the musicians who took part, as we see the members of the royal family now getting into their carriages. The Princess of Wales in a resplendent green dress, because, of course, she is Colonel of the Irish Regiment.
That's why the green.
That's why the green, accompanied by Her Majesty.
It must be said, she looks absolutely magnificent once again.
And her 3 children all getting in. There we are, George last, and his sister first, Charlotte, and then Louis in the middle, as he has been before. In previous years, they've sort of had to keep him under control or been ready to do so, but he seems extraordinarily... I'm sure he's been fascinated by it. Small boys love to see soldiers.
Prince Louis he made his first appearance on the balcony in 2019 for that trooping the colour. That was his first trooping at the age of 1 that he came to. That was the last traditional familiar trooping that we had until today, because, of course, 2020 and 2021, trooping was very much reduced and took place at Windsor Castle because of COVID.
And they'll probably be hoping that the suspension on this carriage is somewhat better than the coronation carriage.
That's very, very uncomfortable. But they'd improved it slightly. The first time the three of them appeared in the carriage, I think one of the newspapers said, here's a whole barrow load of trouble or something like that, because they looked... I think Charlotte was there to make sure her younger brother didn't do anything ill-advised that would have delighted the photographers and maybe the rest of us.
It's remarkable to compare that 2019 trooping to today. So much has changed. On that occasion, the Duke of York was riding as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. Prince Harry and Meghan were in the carriage as well, going off to trooping. The Duke of Edinburgh had just recently stepped down, and the Queen, of course, was sovereign. How much has changed in those past 4 years? It's been an unparalleled time for royal change.
Prince Harry and, of course, his uncle, the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, both lost all of their royal titles and appurtenances and duties, I'm quite sure to the dismay of both of them. But that is how it is. So it's a thinned out royal family, but everybody was on parade today. The King with all his siblings, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, and of course the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. Fine horsewoman. Well, they're all good on horses, but they were there together, and it has gone off tremendously well.
Gentlemen, as we move towards the next stage, of course, the balcony moment. Who isn't there, of course, are the Sussexes. You mentioned Prince Harry just then, Michael. They're really much a brand in decline. Michael wants to talk to you about this as a brand expert as well as a royal expert. There's a newspaper story big in the Daily Mail today that Meghan has been dropped by Spotify for her Archetypes podcast, and it has to be said the chief executive of Spotify using some choice language which should not go anywhere near a royal broadcast. How badly damaged is the Sussexes brand, Michael?
Fairly badly, but let us look at this with some fairness. Let's try and be balanced about it, because the book Spare, which you can deplore for many, many reasons, was or has been the biggest selling autobiography ever published in the history of publishing. So that has been hugely successful. The 6-part Netflix series, depending upon your taste, was a success or an absolute embarrassment. But Netflix certainly got their money's worth, and they have given the Sussexes a contract, reputedly to be more than $100 million worth, for another couple of video enterprises. The problem is, Martin, that you can burn through an awful lot of money very quickly maintaining a hilltop fortress in California. Round-the-clock security can be, is extremely expensive. If the state is not picking up the tab for your bodyguards, you can spend an awful lot of money. And if you're living at that high level, as would be expected by superstars in the Hollywood ambit,
well,
it's expensive.
The show goes on. Michael, Rafe, here we are. We're still with Trooping the Colour. Let's forget about those who aren't here and enjoy instead what is going on here.
Yes, indeed. Although it must be said that because of the absentee status of the Duke of York and Harry and Meghan, we have much smaller balcony appearances now than we had in previous years. So in 2019, for example, if you looked at the balcony, you would see the entire extended royal family, including lesser-known individuals like the Earl of St Andrews and his family, son of the Duke of Kent. All of those people now had to stay away because the party line is only working royals can now appear on the balcony. That was done to get around the difficulty of Prince Andrew and Harry and Meghan. But of course, it means now that we have these much smaller, nuclear almost family scenes on the balcony as the royal family are just arriving back. They've proceeded down the Mall and are entering now into the gates of Buckingham Palace. They'll be going through the central arch of the palace just below the balcony, and we'll have a small intermission, a little time to compose themselves, have a drink, perhaps say their favourite part of the ceremony, have a little chat about the highlights and amusing moments, and then they'll go onto the balcony for 1 o'clock when we will all be gathered for that great flypast, and the crowds will have been allowed onto the Mall, and so we'll have a full scene.
This is just what the King wants, though. He wants a slimmed-down, reduced royal family. He wants to concentrate the focus on the direct line of succession. That's himself, obviously, Prince of Wales, Prince Prince William, and Prince William's 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, in that order. That's what he wants. He's channeling, in a way, King George VI, who said the royal family was always best when it was just us 4, meaning himself, his wife, Queen Elizabeth, who became the Queen Mother, and the 2 princesses, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret Rose. That's what he wanted.
That's right.
And that is what the king wants. He wants to cut it away. He wants to give the image and the reality that it's going to be more focused. And although other people in the royal family will still have roles that they've taken on through charities and other good causes, that will continue. But he wants the public focus to be on himself, not for vain reasons, but that's part of his job, to be seen, and his elder son and the elder son's
That's very true, although a lot of that was predicated on actually having the support of his son and his brother at that time, and in their absence we have seen people like the Duke of Kent, for example, having to take on and continue to take on responsibilities for at least another few years. I think in 15 to 20 years' time, when we see the children of the Prince of Wales take up those roles, we'll see that slimming down to the core line of succession. But until then, I think it behooves the other members of the royal family to take up some of the arduous responsibilities of the royals.
Duke of Kent has been a fantastic servant to this country. I mean, he inherited his title when his father was killed in a wartime air crash in 1942. He was the Duke of Kent as a child, and throughout that he supported his cousin, the Queen, in every way he possibly could, serving in the British Army and carrying out his duties, and was there today, even though he's getting on and he's not particularly fit and he can't ride in the procession anymore. So we're looking now at the main arch into Buckingham Palace, into the central courtyard, waiting for the arrival of the King and his escort, which is provided by the household cavalry. In the front, the Blues and Royals, called Blues because of their blue tunic, and then followed by the lifeguards in their red tunics and their white plumes.
OK, we're going to cut to Cameron Walker now. Cameron, you've been seeing the Royals parade past you. Tell us what you've been seeing.
Hi Martin, yes, well the crowds were cheering as a carriage containing the Duchess of Edinburgh and Vice-Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, who is the Princess Royal's husband, travelled past down the Mall to Buckingham Palace, and then in a carriage behind them was the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, and they were waving quite enthusiastically to the crowds, and it has certainly grown substantially in the last few hours. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have gathered around the Queen Victoria Memorial outside Buckingham Palace, waiting for members of the royal family to arrive back at the palace. And then of course we have the balcony appearance, a now very famous balcony appearance by members of the British royal family, and then the finale of course of the flypast happening at 1 p.m. today. Now, traditionally, when it came to a Trooping the Colour balcony appearance, it was the extended members of the family. They tried to cram as many people on the balcony as possible. That all changed last year for the first Trooping post-COVID, where it was decided that only working members of the royal family would be on the balcony, plus, of course, their children. Now, commentators at the time were perhaps speculating that that was a way to spare Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the Duke of York's blushes. That seems to, as one commentator was telling me earlier, it seems to have set a precedent, really, because we've seen that again with the coronation 6 weeks ago. And now, of course, for Trooping the Colour this time, no confirmation as of yet from Buckingham Palace exactly who we're going to be seeing on the balcony, but my best guess would be working members only, plus Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. Members of the royal family are, as we speak, riding up the Mall. As soon as we spot them and have a camera shot, we'll of course bring them straight to you. But earlier we were talking about the Queen and the Princess of Wales outfits. Michael, I think you were commentating that it was a light green dress. It is, in fact, a dress by Andrew Gien, a hat by Philip Tracy, and she has a regimental brooch. This is the Princess of Wales, Kate, I'm talking about. A regimental brooch of a shamrock on her dress, and that is because she is Colonel of the Irish Guards. The first year she has been so, taking over from her husband, the Prince of Wales, who now, of course, is Colonel of the Welsh Guards. As for the Queen, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, she's wearing a red silk coat dress that takes inspiration from the uniform of the Grenadier Guards. She assumed the position of Grenadier Guards in January, and this is reflected on the dress with the rank insignia of a full colonel on the epaulets. That's the shoulder decoration that she's got. So not quite a uniform, but nonetheless quite a spectacular outfit for the first Trooping the Colour she has been at as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. She as well, Her Majesty as well, alongside the Princess of Wales, wearing a regimental brooch for the first time. And in another first, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, King Charles's brother, youngest brother, is riding alongside him, and the Princess of Wales, and the Princess Royal, and the Prince of Wales, with the King in procession down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. The Princess Royal is Colonel of the Blues and Royals. The Prince of Wales, as I said, Colonel of the Welsh Guards. And the Duke of Edinburgh is Colonel of the London Guards. Now, the London Guards are these very patient soldiers who are lining the Mall, keeping guard of all the proceedings. And when the King passes them, they will give a royal salute. So quite a difference, perhaps, Trooping the Colour from what we had with the late Queen's reign, but nonetheless it still has that tradition, the traditional pomp and pageantry of 260 years of a summer celebration of the King's birthday parade.
Cameron Walker for that update. And gentlemen, now thoughts to be moving towards the 41-gun salute.
Yes, but just to add to what Cameron was saying, there's a little trick that the guards have when they're lining up the route on the Mall in the heat. It can be a tricky occasion for many of them, and so there's a little trick that they have, which is having barley sugar secreted beneath their belts, and if they need it, a policeman can reach in, take the barley sugar out and pop it into their mouth when no one is looking, to give them a little sugar ruff. That's an insider little fact there. But yes, waiting for that 41-gun salute to take part in Green Park, and then there'll be a 61-gun salute also being fired by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery at the Tower of London. 61 because you have the 21 for the royal occasion, 20 for the royal troop, and the fact that it's a royal palace gets it another 20 on top of that. But on the scene here we can see Buckingham Palace in all its glory, with its largest of its ceremonial flags fluttering high above it.
And there you see the King and everybody taking his photograph. It's all right with the barley sugar, but who's going to give the sugar lumps to the horses? That's what I want to know, because they certainly deserve it. I mean, you haven't seen one put a hoof out of place throughout this whole extraordinary parade.
But yes, they're just turning around the Victoria Memorial, approaching the central gateway, entering into Buckingham Palace. And when the King does actually get into Buckingham Palace, we're going to see a mini sort of another version of the changing of the guard, as the escort to the colour, who we've just had trooping their colour, Ed Horse Guards Parade, will now form the new guard at Buckingham Palace for the rest of the day.
Ralph says, you know, going around the Victoria Memorial, everybody's seen it, big marble white thing. London taxi drivers know the Victoria Memorial as the wedding cake. That's what they've always called that, and you can see why.
The other bands and the other regiments who have taken part in trooping won't be entering into won't be forming the new guard, but they're going to have their regimental marches played for them as they pass by the palace.
In the background we see the Privy Purse Gate, which is not the one the King is going through. When I was at the BBC as the court correspondent, I was allowed to drive through there in my BBC Rover, Red Rover 216, and park there, and I could walk in the door at almost any time during office hours. Yeah. Now, here we see something. This is coming to the denouement of this morning's, now into afternoon's ceremonial. An important moment, because
so the King will take the salute.
There we are, royal salute. Members of his family going by, and then his family and the youngsters.
Princess of Wales and the Queen have passed by.
And the three youngsters.
and the non-royal colonels of the regiments.
And the horse there just turning round a little bit, being a little bit awkward, as if it's going into the starting stalls at Newmarket. That's Noble. He's been found for the king. A groom is coming out to ask if the king needs any assistance, keeping the horse where he should be. The king is telling him no. He said, "I think I can cope." That's right. So the groom is going away. The horse is doing a nice little sort of foxtrot to its right. But the king will bring him back to the centre of the thing.
And he gave a reassuring pat to
And
him
here
as
we
well.
come. I think this is the colour party that have just trooped their colour. The Welsh Guards leading the parade with their green and white plumes on the left-hand side of their bearskin caps.
And we were wondering who was going to be on the balcony. Here we can see we have the Duke of Kent on the balcony. I can't quite
Already assembling.
Yeah.
I can't quite make out. Is that the Duke of Gloucester as well? It's hard to see it. I suspect the Duke of Gloucester may be up there
That
too.
is Duke of Gloucester, yeah.
The king's cousin, the Duke of Gloucester, and his Danish-born wife, both of whom have served this country extraordinarily well. By profession, an architect, the Duke of Gloucester, but he takes a great interest in all matters to do with
Michael, if I
architecture.
can cut to Cameron now. Cameron Walker has a much closer, eagle-eyed view. Cameron, tell us about the people on the balcony for us, please.
Yes, on the right you can see the Duke of Kent. Then next to him you have Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, Princess Anne's husband. Then you have the Duchess of Edinburgh, formerly known as Sophie, Countess of Wessex. And you also have the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. So far it appears it's only working members of the royal family on the balcony. We'll have to wait to see if that trend continues. Earlier we saw, as you can see, the king on the right-hand side of your screen for those watching on television. His horse having a little bit of a wobbly, but he seems to be tame now. Of course, that's one thing you can't really prepare for, how well the horses are going to behave themselves on a day like today, but nonetheless handled very well by His Majesty. The Princess of Wales and the Queen and Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis have now arrived back inside Buckingham Palace. I would suspect that they are going to appear on the balcony as well very shortly. Behind the king riding down the Mall, we had the Prince of Wales, Colonel of the Welsh Guards, Princess Royal, Colonel of the Blues and Royals, and the Duke of Edinburgh, formerly known as Edward, Earl of Wessex, whose that title's now gone to his son James, but he is Colonel of the London Guards. And of course Princess Royal had that now infamous red plume in her hat, which covered a certain former working member of the royal family, naming Prince Harry at the coronation ceremony. But we won't be talking about that too much. But at the moment, what we are seeing is His Majesty taking his post at the centre gate of the forecourt, and to his left is the field officer in brigade waiting. So we're just waiting for members of the royal family to appear on the balcony, working members of the royal family. But of course the king still there at the front gate, the centre gate there of Buckingham Palace for the march past.
All this, you know, is all written down in a little blue book by the second, by the minute. Every single thing that's happening out here has been put in a little booklet, and everybody reacts to that, works to that, and makes sure that it all happens to the second. And miraculously, it does. Time after time, it does. You can't plan for everything, but I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's been a 10 today. Everything has gone according to plan. Nothing untoward has occurred. And I think the king can be well satisfied with his first trooping as monarch.
That's good to see, Rafe. Today, no proceedings were interrupted by any form of protests.
Yes, although I would have been surprised, I must say, had there been any protest at trooping. It's an event that normally passes unnoticed and unremarked upon by Republicans, unlike, say, events like coronations or grander affairs.
And here's the King's troop going past, so called by the late Queen's father, King George VI. They're going past, and they will then be firing a salute to recognise the King's official birthday. And I think, Rafe, I think it's 40 guns for a monarch, isn't it?
Yes, it's for 41 gun salute in Green Park, and there'll be a 61 gun salute fired at the Tower of London. Another 20 because it's a royal palace. And there we also have, with an unlikely combination, a saxophone with the most ancient uniform worn in the British Army, the band of the Household Cavalry. Their uniform dates back to 1685, and so it's curious to see it paired with a saxophone there.
Yeah, all these regiments were actually founded by King Charles II, or most of them were, on the restoration of the monarchy after the, well, essentially a republic, the Commonwealth of Oliver Cromwell. And when King Charles II returned to this country from France, he brought with him a lot of his mates, and they became his sort of bodyguard. And essentially, the household division of the royal family started off as the King's personal bodyguard. Of course, it's a very important part of the British Army, and everybody you're seeing today is a frontline soldier. The guys we're looking at now, going past, the members of the Household Cavalry, they drive tanks, they drive reconnaissance vehicles in battle, and have done. And would do tomorrow.
That's such an important point to make. As the Blues and Royals now take the salute in front of His Majesty the King, it's important to remember that all of these troops, they look fine and resplendent here as a picture postcard perfect, but they all have an operational function as well, which is very serious. And all of this training and discipline prepares them in large part also for great aspects of their operational duties. And the colours that we keep speaking about, the colours that have been trooped before the regiment, are actually battle honours. They are inscribed with the most celebrated battles in which those earlier generations of those troops took part, and from the First World War to the Second World War, in some cases to the Boer War, and earlier all the way up until the Falklands War, and indeed service has been seen in Afghanistan and Iraq as well.
Rafe mentions colours. Martin, you will have noticed, because you're an observant man, a journalist, that the colour of the road, the Mile and Horse Guards, is red. It's nothing to do with it being the approach to Buckingham Palace. It's because they mix the tarmac with rubber so that it gets better grip in the wet for the horse's hooves, so they don't slip, which I think is very thoughtful. But it does make it a rather special way of approaching Buckingham Palace. And of course, when we look at Buckingham Palace, we are looking at what was intended when it was the Duke of Buckingham's residence to be the back of it. But to the world, that's the front of it, and that's where the balcony is, and that's where the members of the royal family who are working royals will be appearing together for the flypast, which will be the culmination of a great day of ceremonial, which I think has gone off remarkably well, without a hitch.
And as well as the tremendous precision on the ground, gentlemen, we have, as we speak, tremendous precision in the air. That flypast, of course, taken off from 15 locations up and down the UK, from as far north as Skegness, across the southeast. They're all forming up.
That's right.
The southeast. And describe what's going on now.
So just to say, so the mass bands of the Household Cavalry have now departed, and the King has finished taking the salute from all of those who were at trooping, and he's now entering back into the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, where the changing of the guard is taking place as the Welsh First Battalion of the Welsh Guard, whose colour was trooped, form the new guard for the remainder of the day at Buckingham Palace. And the King is now processing between the two, the old and the new guard, on either side of His Majesty as he enters into the main courtyard of the palace. But as you say, yes, from 15 different points across the country, a great flypast of 70 planes, which had previously assembled for the coronation, will actually get to make their debut today, flying down the Mall. A complicated process, because you have to time ancient planes like Spitfires and Lancaster bombers with the latest jets, and so in order to get that timing right, planes that can go 1,000 miles an hour between those that can only go around 100 or so is very complicated, and we'll be seeing 70 of those, the highlight of which I suppose will be the plane that carried Her late Majesty to London, and also the royal family's new latest jet, the Envoy 4, the fastest jet the royals have had, as well as the Hercules, the great transport plane of the Royal Air Force, which is being put out to pasture, and this will be one of the last times it'll be seen in active service.
More than 50 years, the Hercules C-130 A30 has been in service with the RAF. That's the longest of any type ever. I'm quite sure it would be quite excusable for the King to say, phew, thank goodness that's over, when he dismounts here in a couple of minutes. I'm not quite sure whether we get a shot of that. But obviously it's a great strain, it's a great ordeal. Sitting there on horseback, making sure everything is good, making sure it all goes according to plan. You're on display and you want it to be a good show, and it certainly has been. By strange chance, Martin, I was on a historic trawler called the Enterprise out into the North Sea on one day when I saw all the aircraft assembling. They assemble over the North Sea off the Essex and Suffolk coast, and they get into order, and as Rafe was saying, it's difficult because they all fly at different speeds normally, and then they form up over Essex and they come down, virtually down the sort of A12 road or the A13 road, over the City of London, over St Paul's, down Fleet Street, down the Strand, over Admiralty Arch, down the Mall, right over the top. I mean, a quite brilliant feat of airmanship. And of course, not very many years ago, I was just about born, I think, the Luftwaffe used exactly that route when they bombed Buckingham Palace. And the right-hand side of the palace, as we're looking at it now, that was very badly damaged for some years and had to be completely rebuilt. The Queen and Queen Elizabeth and King George VI were there the next day looking at it, and of course the Queen Mother, as she became, said, now at least I can look the East End in the face, because obviously they'd been to the East End where there'd been terrible bombing, and now she was sharing their fate.
Yeah, and that momentous visit to the East End by the Queen Mum just went down in history as that tremendous connection between the royals and, I guess you call them, the common people.
That's right, and of course for her Platinum Jubilee, when the Queen made her last balcony appearance, who amongst us couldn't forget the images of the Second World War, where the Queen stood with Winston Churchill and her parents and her sister on that balcony, and there she was at the Platinum Jubilee 70 years later, the last person from that era. Now a chapter of history closed.
It was very rare for the Prime Minister to be invited onto the balcony with the monarch. I mean, there's a strict separation between the monarchy and the executive. But at the end of the Second World War, Winston Churchill had been invited onto the balcony. It was quite interesting because when he came back from Munich, having sold out Czechoslovakia, Mr. Chamberlain, Neville Chamberlain, was also invited onto the balcony because the King, and in particular the Queen Elizabeth, who'd lost her favourite brother, David, in the war, First World War, they were very, very keen there should not be another war. Of course, who in their right mind wants another war? But they were very much on the side of Chamberlain, and everybody did celebrate that. They said, God bless, there was a song, God bless you, Mr. Chamberlain, for bringing peace in our time, as they thought. And at that time, the King and Queen, certainly the Queen, regarded Winston Churchill as a warmonger. But 6 years later, he was there on the balcony with the King and Queen at the end of the Second World War, VE Day. And there we see Buckingham Palace with that huge sovereign's standard flying over it. I mean, it's the size of a large tablecloth, isn't it? Or bigger.
There are different sized flags depending upon the status of the occasion, and this is the grandest and the biggest of them all. And just to the right of Buckingham Palace is, of course, Green Park, so called because it is devoid of all flowers. No flowers are in Green Park, and that is where the gun salute is taking place from the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, who just moments ago took the salute in front of His Majesty in the palace. They are now set up in Green Park, firing that salute, as their compatriots are also doing at the Tower of London.
And a very sweet story about why there are no flowers in Green Park.
Well, there are many different versions of that. What's your version of that?
Well, I thought it's because no bloom was allowed to be greater than the beauty of...
Oh, that's a lovely one. It's much better than one that I was told, that it was a leper graveyard, and they decided I'll go with your ones before.
when my mother first went out to work as a very young girl, she lived in Dover Street in Mayfair, and she used to walk through Green Park every morning to go to the Girl Guides Association. She'd been a guide, and she got a job as an office girl there. And every morning she used to see King George V, and he used to ride in Green Park in his bowler hat with just a groom, no detectives, no protection, and as he would go along, he would raise his hat at the young ladies and so on and so forth. I mean, I'm talking about 1928-ish. That's the time it was. Yes, one of the royal parks of London. Actually, not controlled by the royal family. They're controlled by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, as it so happens.
And of course, they all were originally hunting grounds for the royal family to hunt deer, and of course, dating back to King Henry VIII's time and earlier, as was the ground of trooping the colour. The Horse Guards Parade was originally King Henry VIII's jousting ground.
Hyde Park, in German, Heide means heath, so it was a heath. And I think it was Queen Charlotte, who was the Queen of George II, yes? Yeah. She established the Serpentine there as a pleasure resort where people could go, in fact, bathe. They still do. I'm sure they'll be swimming there today.
Yeah. And of course, although we think of the royal family and the monarchy as being very ancient, as indeed it is ancient, many of these ceremonies and traditions are much younger than perhaps we thought. Of course, the king's birthday wasn't always celebrated with trooping the colour. The king and the sovereign had two birthdays from around the 18th century, following King George III having a birthday in a cold November. There was the decision to have it in the summer, but it's relatively recent, only in the early 19th century really, that we see the King's birthday parade celebrated with trooping in the manner that we see today. And this whole route down the Mall, this was a creation of the Edwardians. It was King Edward VII who actually decided that imperial Britain needed a great triumphal route for the pomp and pageantry to take full effect, as with the Champs-Élysées in Paris. And so much of the ceremonial that today we think of as being ancient is actually relatively recent.
Yeah, in fact, Admiralty Arch was built during the reign of Edward VII. And as Rafe says, a lot of new things, because the 1st Battalion of the Welsh Guards, who troop their colour today, they've only been in existence since 1915, which isn't a long time ago. And the Blues and Royals, they were not amalgamated as a regiment until 1969. You know, within our lifetime, all these things came. But that's the thing about the monarchy. It changes in order that it stays the same.
Yeah. Even the great face of Buckingham Palace that we see, that is a 20th century extension. This was the 1920s. Sir Aston Webb, at the behest of Queen Mary and King George, put that up. Before that, it was an open courtyard.
And right in the front there, hard to believe, what is now Marble Arch. That Marble Arch, which is a good mile away at the other end of Park Lane, that actually stood in the courtyard where we saw the King take the salute at the central gate.
Built by John Nash, yes.
And how significant do you think, gentlemen, is this trooping of the colour? Because, of course, we had the sad passing of Her Majesty. Many still were mourning for that. The coronation recently. In terms of that continuity, as you mentioned there, Michael, this is back to business as normal. You know, the pageantry marches on.
I think you've said it. That's exactly what. You know, what is the purpose of the royal family is succession. And securing the succession and continuity, carrying on, doing their job in a constitutional monarchy. It's extraordinarily important. Constitutional monarchy is probably our best defence against extremism and dictatorship in this country. The fact that, you know, once a week the Prime Minister has to go and see the monarch and sits down for a perfectly confidential chat from which nothing ever leaks. That is a very important prerogative. The monarch has the royal prerogative to be informed, to be able to encourage, and also to be able to warn. And that's very important. And every Prime Minister I've ever heard on the subject has said that they gained immensely from the weekly audiences they had of the Queen during her record-breaking reign.
You know, the constitutional monarchies around the world are the most stable form of government, whether it be looking at Scandinavia, Japan, and so forth. And it's ceremonies like these that are rather reassuring to a population, that whilst around us everything may seem to be going to hell in a handbasket and the world is in a state of rapid flux, ever-changing, these ceremonies ground us to our tradition, and the monarchy is sort of that rock that anchors Britain to its history and to its past and gives us a reassuring sense of national identity.
Martin, I think maybe you'll agree with me that monarchies tend to be the happier lands. If I do a little test with you, if I may, If I said to you, would you rather live in Morocco or Algeria? Would you rather live in Jordan or Syria? Would you rather live in Japan or China? Would you rather live in Australia or Indonesia? Would you rather live in Denmark or Lithuania? If you chose the first of those pairings each time, you'd have chosen a monarchy over a republic. Republicanism is a perfectly respectable thing, but let's not fool ourselves. There's nothing more modern about a republic. When the republics of ancient Rome fell into corruption and decay, they replaced them, and they replaced them with a monarchy.
And every year, if you look at the United Nations Human Development Index, or, the majority of the best countries in the world, in the top 10 or 15, are monarchies. And these aren't antiquated or anachronistic, as some would have us believe. Nobody would say that Sweden or Denmark or Norway or Belgium aren't socially progressive modern states. In fact, quite often, it's the trappings of monarchy and ceremony that enable a society to go through rapid social change and stay stable. That's one of the reasons some people think, for example, France had so much strife in the 1960s as it decolonized compared to Britain. We still had the trappings of imperial power that made us feel things were much more certain and stable than in France, where we saw so many riots and so much bloodshed at that same period.
It was the most successful end of empire ever without bloodshed. The Queen never ever went to hand over a ceremonial. She always sent a member of the family to see the Union Jack come down. But the Queen presided over the end of empire in a most elegant and effective way, and it was accomplished with great style, and witnessed the fact that almost every country that had been a member of the British Empire then decided to become part of the Commonwealth, originally the British Commonwealth, which the Queen's father, King George VI, played an important part in setting up after the end of the British Empire.
And how important are these events for strengthening that Commonwealth? I mean, we're hearing rumblings about countries that may want to leave or hold a referendum on leaving the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth. Do you think these kind of events help to cement things together?
I think they're an important symbol of that. I mean, we have to remember there's a difference between the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth realms, and those countries that decide to become republics still inevitably remain members of the Commonwealth, which is a unique organisation. It's a free association. Let's remember, these are people who allegedly threw off the yoke of imperialism and decided to remain a free association. Now, my mother's Polish. When the Soviet Union collapsed and the Iron Curtain fell, they couldn't get out of there quick enough and join NATO. But this was a unique thing that Britain had because, of course, they realised that through the common law, the English language, the judiciary, the police structure, that they had left behind in these countries systems that enabled them to become global players. And as Michael said, these were peaceful transitions. Members of the royal family lowering in their ostrich-plumed hats, lowering the Union flag. And so I think that the monarchy, as that non-formal link between the Commonwealth, of course we have to remember that there's nothing requiring the sovereign to be head of the Commonwealth. It's been agreed upon freely by these independent countries. I think still has a much valued role to play in strengthening that bond.
Yes, because the king is the king of this country and 14 overseas realms. And it's, I think, a misconception that the Queen didn't object if anybody wanted to become a republic. I mean, that's the point of having a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy is there to enact the will of the people as expressed through the ballot box. There is a monarchy in this country because it has and commands the support of the people. And I think, to get back to your original question, does an event like today help to cement that? I think it does. I mean, anybody who has no past can perhaps dismiss this as anachronistic, but it has a real importance to the armed forces, has a real importance to the country. It's a display of affection, it's a display of recognition of what the royal family does for this country, and it carries it out in a remarkably good way to the great applause of people around the world.
And remember also we have the King's birthday honours that came out today as well, of course, and the King is the fount of honour, the fons honorum, and we have to remember that the monarch is actually a symbol of those all-important civic values that make up the backbone of civil society: volunteerism, philanthropy, philanthropy, giving back to your community. This is the monarch's way of actually showing that the things that he espouses as being important in this country are those things that actually make a society cohesive. And I think very few countries in the world have an occasion where we can actually celebrate those unsung heroes of Britain that otherwise, if it wasn't for a monarchy, would never be noticed. Those school dinner ladies, those people working in charities or giving aid to Ukraine, whatever they're doing. This is a way for the state, through the monarch, actually, with no political bias, to honour those people who make up Britain.
I think we can just hear the gun salute just starting there, gentlemen.
Yeah, OK. Martin, just to give you an example, font of all honours. I mean, I covered Watergate, 74, in America. For 18 months, America was in paralysis because the president, who is the number one citizen, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the font of all honour, had found out to be a crook. And nothing could happen in America. The Constitution eventually expelled him. The Canadians looked down from the north and said, thank goodness our head of state is above politics, is not another crook. And Her Majesty the Queen, in a way, bound together the second biggest country in the whole world after Russia, Canada. Two things bound her together, the Queen
quickly to Cameron
and
Walker.
also the Canadian National Railway, and over to Cameron.
Cameron Walker, what's the latest?
Well, Martin, the gun salutes you may be able to hear have just started firing. The King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery firing a 40 gun salute in Green Park. Members of the royal family who were previously on the balcony have now gone back inside, waiting for the big grand appearance from all members of, well, working members at least, of the royal family, led by His Majesty the King. Of course, the crowds, the hundreds, thousands of people who had turned out to watch trooping the colour in the King's birthday parade have been allowed by the police to surge forward to the gates, the front gates of Buckingham Palace, in preparation for the balcony appearance and, of course, the flypast, scheduled to start in just 7 minutes' time. 70 aircraft from Royal Air Force, Royal Navy and British Army will be taking part. It's very much an extended flypast, perhaps making up for the disappointment of the coronation flypast, which was scaled back quite substantially due to that bad weather 6 weeks or so ago. I just wanted to bring you the most amazing photograph of Prince. Now, before we show it, oh, there we go, we can see it now.
Well, it had to happen.
If you haven't seen it, look on GB News' social media channels. There's a lot of horse waste, let's say, and following the procession that was coming back down the Mall, the crowd started cheering again. And I was wondering, well, why are they cheering now? And then two street cleaners came up the Mall following all the horses to clean up the mess. But clearly, Prince Louis was not amused by the smell, the stench at Horse Guards parades, because, of course, 300 horses have taken part in today's ceremonial proceedings. And, yeah, well, I mean, it's Prince Louis all over, isn't it? Of course, we had that fabulous image of him last year's trooping the colour during the flypast, of him screaming with his hands over his ears, and now of course we've got this, and he seems certainly like perhaps a little bit of a character, but nonetheless I think this is what people love about the royal family, that they are normal people, normal children, albeit very privileged, but nonetheless they are acting like any other child would, I think, in this kind of situation. We are expecting Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis on the balcony, along with their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, of course the Prince of Wales, Colonel of the Welsh Guards, who are the ones trooping their colour today, and the Princess of Wales, Catherine, Colonel of the Irish Guards. We are expecting perhaps only working members of the royal family on the balcony, but that has not been confirmed by Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace. In times gone by, it has been perhaps extended family members, but for last year, of course, it was only working members of the royal family. Perhaps some would argue to spare the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and Prince Andrew's blushes. Now, we're very close to that flypast, just 3.5 minutes or so away, which makes me think that the members of the royal family will be appearing any moment now. We have the ceremonial royal standard flying above Buckingham Palace. The gun salutes are still going on in Green Park by the King's Troop Royal Horse artillery. As I said, 70 aircraft are taking part in that flypast from the Royal Navy, Royal Air Force and British Army. A number of helicopters. We have the Battle of Britain memorial flight, including a Spitfire and I believe a Lancaster bomber as well. And then, of course, we have perhaps more modern aircraft, the RAF Voyager, which is used by members of the royal family and indeed the Prime Minister on overseas visits. And we are expecting a magnificent finale with the Red Arrows taking part. So the flypast itself is meant to last for about 6 minutes. And you can just see a shot, for those of you watching on television, of the Buckingham Palace balcony, made famous really over a number of years. I think VE Day perhaps was a particularly poignant one in 1945, where the late Queen, then Princess Elizabeth, George VI, the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret appeared on that balcony with Winston Churchill following the Allied victory in 1945. And of course, every trooping the colour since, pretty much, we have seen members of the royal family on that balcony. Royal weddings, famous kiss between William and Catherine in April 2011. And of course, last year, very sadly, poignantly maybe, the final balcony appearances by Queen Elizabeth II. She appeared 3 times during those Platinum Jubilee celebrations, twice on the first day for Trooping the Colour last year, which happened on the 2nd of June, the 69th anniversary of her coronation, and then one final appearance following the Platinum Jubilee pageant, which took place on Sunday, I think it was June the 5th, where she was wearing that magnificent green, light green coloured dress. And actually someone else wearing a light green coloured dress is the Princess of Wales, Colonel of the Irish Guards. She has a shamrock regimental brooch on her dress to signify the fact to signal that she is the Colonel, not wearing military uniform. Of course, she travelled in a carriage as well, but nonetheless, I think members of the royal family, it's certainly an occasion to dress up. We are now 2 minutes, I think, from that flypast taking place, so I would expect the royal family to appear on the balcony. So get your guesses in as to exactly who is going to be appearing. My guess will be working members of the royal family, so the King, Queen, Prince and Princess of Wales, their 3 children, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, the Princess Royal, Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, we've already seen on the balcony a little bit earlier as the King was taking his royal salute on the horse. And I believe the doors have just opened, and here are members of the royal family appearing on the balcony for the King's first birthday parade of his reign. We see the King and Queen there. To his right, we have the Princess of Wales holding the hand of her daughter, Princess Charlotte, who is just over to the King's right. Nice grandfatherly pat on the back from the King to his granddaughter, Princess Charlotte. The Prince of Wales, Prince George, Prince Louis as well. I can see the Princess Royal and Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence is just off the screen there. The Duchess of Edinburgh as well, and the Duke of Edinburgh just to the Queen's right, just to the Queen's left even, and the Duke of Kent. So just working members of the royal family, it would appear, on the balcony. And here we are, the start of the flypast. 70 aircraft from all 3 armed services flying over Buckingham Palace. So we have 3 Juno HT-1 helicopters, followed by 1 Royal Navy Wildcat Mark II helicopter. We have 2 Royal Navy Merlin Mark II helicopters as well. 1 British Army Wildcat Mark I helicopter, accompanied by 4 British Army Apache helicopters. 1 Wildcat Mark I helicopter, 2 Merlin Mark IV helicopters, and we're expecting any moment now, there you are, 3 RAF Chinook helicopters, 1 RAF Puma HC-2 helicopter as well, just behind them. And now we're coming up to the RAF Battle of Britain memorial flight. So any second now, we are going to get 1 RAF Lancaster bomber. I can hear the engine, so it must be any time soon. From the Battle of Britain Memorial flights, getting a cheer from the crowds here who have gathered on the Mall and around Victoria Memorial outside Buckingham Palace. Those vintage engines you can hear, accompanied by 2 RAF Hurricanes and 1 RAF Spitfire. We're then going to be expecting 1 RAF Phenom T1 aircraft and 4 RAF Texan T1 aircrafts as well. I can just see the Battle of Britain Memorial flights banking off to the north of Buckingham Palace. There we are, 1 RAF Phenom, 4 RAF Texan T1s just flying over the palace as I speak. We're getting closer and closer to modern day aircraft now, modern day planes, I should say. Next up, we're going to have 3 RAF C-1330J Hercules aircraft. I can hear the engines getting a cheer from the crowds. I can see wavings of Union flags. Magnificent sights and magnificent sounds just flying over the balcony. Members of the royal family looking pretty impressed. As we predicted, just working members of the royal family on that famous balcony. Next up, we should have the RAF C-17 Globemaster aircraft. I can hear the engines getting louder and louder. There it is, RAF C-17, of course, perhaps made famous in September last year for carrying the late Queen's coffin from Edinburgh back to London before her final night at Buckingham Palace in September 2022. It was also the aircraft that brought back a number of the coffins of fallen service personnel during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We now have the RAF Voyager aircraft, painted magnificently in Union Jack colours. That aircraft is used by members of the royal family and the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, actually, and any other minister on foreign overseas trips. Very close by to that Voyager is the RAF A400M Atlas aircraft. We then have some more RAF aircraft coming across. The RAF Poseidon aircraft, just one of those, just flying over Buckingham Palace, accompanied by 2 RAF Typhoon aircraft, flying in formation there, going straight over Buckingham Palace towards the west of London. So no doubt everybody else living in London is going to get a pretty magnificent display as well, particularly if you live in the west. And then we're expecting 18 RAF Typhoon aircraft very soon. We're about 4 minutes into this 6 minutes display. The crowd seemed pretty mesmerised by it all on the Mall and around the Victoria Memorial. So here are, very loudly, 6 RAF F-35B Lightning aircraft. Unfortunately, I can't quite see a shot of Prince Louis to see his reaction, but we'll have to wait for the photograph to see if it's the same reaction to last year. Following that, we're expecting 18 RAF Typhoon aircraft. The crowd seem pretty impressed, I've got to say, eagerly awaiting the rest of this magnificent extended flypast by the Royal Air Force, Royal Navy and British Army. The crowds have erupted in cheers. 18 RAF Typhoon aircraft flying over Buckingham Palace, in the formation of a C and a K. Clearly that is a nod to King Charles III. Next up, we're going to have 1 Envoy 4 CC-1 aircraft just before we get to the grand finale of the Red Arrows. But before that, crowds continuing to cheer, very enthusiastic in this magnificent weather. 1 Envoy 4 CC-1 aircraft just flying over Buckingham Palace now. And the spectacular finale Red Arrows, the aerobatics team. And that is the conclusion of the extended flypast to celebrate the King's official birthday, his first official birthday of his reign, and the first King's birthday parade and celebrations in 70 years. Members of the royal family waving to the crowds who are cheering, and the national anthem is now playing. So you can see Prince George to the left of your screen, future king, second in line to the throne. The Princess of Wales, Prince of Wales, Prince Louis, Princess Charlotte, King Charles III with his Queen, Queen Camilla, and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Cheers from the very enthusiastic crowds. Thousands of people gathered to see members of the royal family on the balcony. Members of the royal family enthusiastically waving back at them. Also on the balcony we have the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, the Princess Royal, Vice Admirals Tim Lawrence, and the Duke of Kent. And it appears they are making their way back inside Buckingham Palace following that magnificent extended fly past. A reassuring tap on the back by the Princess of Wales to her oldest son, Prince George of Wales, future king himself, and the doors are now closed. And that is, I believe, the end of the ceremonial proceedings celebrating the King's first birthday parade of his reign. As I said, 70 years since we have had a King's birthday parade. The weather was glorious, but not too hot. We didn't have any fainting soldiers as we had done in the rehearsal. There were no protests, only working members of the royal family on the balcony, keeping it slick, keeping it clean. Perhaps a little bit of smelly horse waste, which did not amuse Prince Louis, but nonetheless, I think all in all, Martin, a pretty successful trooping the colour for 2023, and no doubt the King is going to be looking forward to his future birthday parades, official birthday parades, as sovereign.
Well, Cameron Walker from Buckingham Palace Live, what a magnificent spectacle that was, and a brilliant job by you. And also thank you so much to Michael Cole in the studio, a voice I grew up with as a boy, listening to him commenting on Trooping the Colour. What a privilege it was to sit next to him today and hear his wisdom in person. And also, of course, Rafe Heidel Manku. What a font of knowledge he's been. A tremendous event, and I'm so proud of GB News' coverage of today. I really hope you've enjoyed it, especially those planes going past. God, it stirs the cockles, doesn't it? Warms the heart. What a fabulous event. OK, let's crack on with the rest of the show now. Hello and welcome to GB News Saturday. I'm Martin Daubney, and for the next 2 hours, I'll be giving you company on TV, online, and of course, on your digital radio. Coming up this hour, Boris Johnson gets a new job and is branded the most disgraced ex-Prime Minister in British history. Is this the final chapter in Bojo's political career, or will it be yet another triumphant return to frontline politics? Sir Paul McCartney says he's employed artificial intelligence to help create what he calls the final Beatles record with John Lennon's voice. But is it ethical to use a dead man's voice to sell records? And should cyclists be made to have number plates and insurance? Well, several countries are already trying it, and cyclists in Italy will be made to have licence plates, indicators, insurance and wear helmets, following a proposed law by its government. If proven successful, should we do the same here in Blighty? OK, let's get stuck in today's topics now. First of all, former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney says Brexit is to blame for inflation. Well, of course he does. Mr Carney says that the soaring high rates were a result of leaving the European Union. In an interview with the Daily Telegraph, he says he feels vindicated after predicting Brexit would lead to higher prices, a weaker pound and slower growth. Well, joining now to discuss this is GB News senior political commentator, great pal of mine, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, what a surprise. Mark Carney thinks everything is the fault of Brexit, Mr. Project Fear. If a meteoroid struck Earth, Carney would blame Brexit. But does he have a point?
Well, I think he does. But the point is that it's not that everything is the fault of Brexit. And the impression that given by Mark Carney's interview is that it is. Certainly, inflation has a load of other reasons for hitting us. I mean, COVID didn't help, as that destroyed supply lines. We've got the war in Ukraine. But the various different surveys have shown that Brexit had actually increased inflation a bit. So take food inflation. It's gone up 25% since 2019. This is according to an annual survey that the LSE does. Now, they reckon that 8% of that rise is down to Brexit. So as a result of Brexit, families are paying £250 more a year.
OK, so we have soaring inflation in USA, Italy, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Poland, Spain and Australia. Is that because of Brexit?
No, I mean, this is the point, that the inflation is a worldwide problem and it's to do with global events. What I'm saying is that a bit of the stuff we're suffering in this country, especially food inflation, which is higher than in most of those places, that part of that is a result of Brexit. That's not to say Brexit was a mistake or anything like that. If you voted for Brexit because you wanted British sovereignty, taking back control in Dominic Cummings's immortal words, you got what you voted for. That was fine. But one of the things that I always thought at the time was not that Brexit would be a disaster, but there would be a price that would be paid for it. And I think that this is an example of the price we are paying. I didn't happen to think that price was worth it. That's why I voted Remain.
But how is it, Nigel, call me a cynic, how is it that Mark Carney is able to singularly go to Brexit as the reason when we've had the pandemic, we've had the war in Ukraine, we've had soaring utility costs, we've had all of this coming our shores. And as I said, it also is happening across every European member state. It's happening across the Americas, Australasia. Yet, how come he says he's able just to pin it on Brexit? Isn't this just a case of Mr. Project Fear is suddenly now Mr. I told you so?
Well, he certainly wants to tell us he told us so.
Yeah.
But he's not blaming everything on Brexit. He's blaming part of it on Brexit. So he acknowledges the problems that have come from the war in Ukraine, from COVID destroying supply lines. So he does bring that in. And of course, some of his predictions weren't right. There hasn't been a recession as a result of Brexit. There hasn't been high employment. Employment is really good at the moment. So he would also say that some of his predictions were wrong. It's just taking the point in that some of what we're paying at the moment is as a result of Brexit. That was the price we had to pay for it.
Well, it also seemed every time he opened his mouth when he was the governor of the Bank of England, there was a run on the pound when he was talking down Britain through Project Fear. Isn't also part of the problem with soaring inflation the fact that the Bank of England printed so much money?
Well, that goes along with it as well. You're absolutely right. I mean, nobody's hands are clean in this. So,
including Mr. Carney.
Well, including Mr. Carney. So there is a sort of a myriad of reasons why we're in the mess we're in. And no, you can't blame the whole thing on Brexit. But it is a matter of actually what I would hope the Brexiteers would acknowledge, that Brexit did come at a cost, and this is the kind of cost we're paying. Now, you may feel that £250 a year on food extra is not such a major thing, but there are other things that we'll lose out on. Imports and exports are down by 15%. That's a direct result of Brexit. Probably,
it's also a result of the global calamity of closing down the economy for 2 years during lockdown. My point is, how can all these huge events have happened, but Mr. Carney is so confident it was because of Brexit? Is that true, or is this just a case of sour grapes and him saying, I told you so all along?
It is that part of it is to do with Brexit. I just think that Brexiteers such as yourself should acknowledge that there was a cost for it, and it doesn't make it wrong. I'm assuming that you voted for Brexit because you believed in British sovereignty, which was the key around it. But I mean, anybody who believed the idea that the economy would suddenly take off because of Brexit, we'd all be so much richer, that was never a goer. That was never actually realistic. realistic. So you pay a bit of a price for it, and we get our own sovereignty. If you're happy with that, you'll be happy with Brexit.
Well, you could argue that we didn't implement Brexit in the manner which was most effective. For example, things like the fishing industry, which was completely, I think, thrown under the bus by Boris Johnson. We didn't Brexit properly. We didn't take back control of our waters. That was the key point. The level playing field. There's huge opportunities there to have a low tax economy, such as the Republic of Ireland, which we haven't done, or Cyprus. So there were opportunities, but I think we had a government that perhaps just didn't make the most of Brexit. So I don't think you can sort of say there was an economic price to pay. There could have been benefits, but did we have the people with the guts to go for it? Or are we having a bunch of people who are soft Brexiteers and their hearts are never really in it?
Well, I think we're now taking a different tack there. It's actually whether or not Brexit really worked or not, and whether it could have worked better. And one of the things I think we should all be united on is that we want to make Brexit as good as it possibly can be. The one thing that got me was how little we ever thought about Brexit before it happened. So David Cameron calls the referendum. Never occurs to him what might go wrong. And we're still paying the price with, say, Northern Ireland, that the only way that you would satisfy the unionists in Northern Ireland would be if the whole of the UK was in the single market. Now, of course, that's not Brexit. So we should have actually spent a lot more time working out how to make Brexit work.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're back in the next hour, aren't you?
I'm indeed.
We need to have another go at this, because, Nigel, I could talk about Brexit all day to you. Thank you, Nigel Nelson. Always superb, you're back. Boris Johnson, next story, has secured a new job at the Daily Mail newspaper after quitting as an MP over the Partygate report that found he has lied to MPs. So is it time for the Conservative Party to move on from Boris? Well, Rishi Sunak certainly thinks so. But the civil war triggered by Johnson is still raging. A poll has found that more than 3/4 of people think Johnson knowingly misled the Commons. But the man who delivered an 8-seat majority and then got Brexit done remains a popular figure among a large number of Conservative members. Well, joining me now is the political editor of Express Online, David Maddox. Research fellow at the Bow Group, Ben Loughnane, who was in yesterday. And still with me is our very own Nigel Nelson. Bit more Brexit. David Maddox, let's start with you. You're a newspaper man. He's bagged himself a very well-paid job, it seems. High 6 figures at the Daily Mail. As a newspaper man, have you read the column and what do you make of it?
I have. It was very interesting about cheese. Funnily enough, he seemed to have avoided the kind of the elephant in the room. Dare I say it? Although I was told by his friends before that when we all found out he was going to do this column, that he was going to be making oblique references and digs at various people. I gather the person in the braces and the diet was meant to be Michael Gove, but anyway, there we are.
Yeah, it was a bizarre column, I have to say. I read it expecting, some major revelations about his time in Downing Street, and instead we got like a long rambling essay about the benefits of weight loss drugs. And if I was Boris, I'd ask for his money back because he hasn't lost a lot of weight. Let's move on to you, Nigel. Got you here. People are still talking about a comeback. People are still talking about a comeback. Is it possible? Is there a route back for him, or do you think actually it's now curtains for Boris?
There's always a possibility. Never say never in politics. And as people have endlessly said over the last couple of days, everything Boris has done is out of the Donald Trump playbook. And you can see that Donald Trump has a very good chance of being president of the United States again. I think what Boris is doing is, he doesn't know himself, that this is not a strategy, it's a tactic. So on Friday night, by resigning from Uxbridge, he was leaving his options open to get a much safer seat. And the Mail column was interesting today because he avoided politics entirely. I think that was actually quite a clever move. Mm-hmm. What it means is when he wants to address politics, it'll come as even more of a bombshell. So it means that those options are open for him. I think he won't come back, but he could.
Benjamin, does this newspaper opportunity give Boris the chance to constantly lob grenades at the Tory party? Might this be a foundation for him to cause so much trouble he's a constant voice and make that return? So in terms of his future career prospects back into politics, it's a pretty smart move, isn't it, to be throwing grenades from the sidelines from the biggest Tory voting newspaper in Britain?
Yeah, it's definitely given him a soapbox from which to spout off about his political enemies and the people he feels he has grudges against. But I don't think he'll use it for that. I think he's at the moment, he seems to be using it because he loves the art of writing. He does love journalism. It's where he started. I think, frankly, he's a much better journalist than he is a politician, and he should stick with it. You know, whilst he was PM, we saw immigration soar. The country went into what we now know, disastrous lockdown. And frankly, you know, he hasn't been taken to task on the things he actually did get wrong. He's been criticised for having parties and eating cake. I think we need to actually have a reckoning with Boris's time as PM and say he did make some big mistakes and we need to deal with those. But then the problem is, who else in the party is actually any better than he is? I certainly don't think Rishi Sunak is any better on immigration or on the economy, for example. So let's see.
OK, David Maddox, back to you. If you want to find out what Tory voters think, then you go to The Express. What are your readers telling you about the perceived stitch-up, the kangaroo court? They still think Boris was wronged.
Absolutely. I mean, for our readers, Boris is a hero still. He's a guy who got Brexit won and then done. And really, they see this whole business of weaponising the parliamentary system against him as a way of trying to undo Brexit and attack Brexit and undo Conservative values. Although I'd agree with Ben that whilst he's Prime Minister, I think the greatest criticism of him was that he was essentially a Liberal Prime Minister who didn't really deliver Conservative policies. But that's a different matter. You know, this is seen as an assassination attempt, an attempt to finish him off. I disagree with Nigel. I think he definitely will come back. I think the plans are in place. This is the Mail column, certainly a tactic, but it's one of many tactics. And I think after a Conservative defeat, the next leader will need his blessing, and that will open the door for a return in the future.
And the scandal rolls on. The front of today's Times. There's now Boris's notebooks are on trial. Security fears in that. Nigel Nelson, is this valid criticism on his way out? I mean, he's already gone, really. Or is this now moving into the realms of a full-blown character assassination of Boris? Because because the Labour Party, he's the man they still fear the most as a Tory leader?
Well, we don't know what other Tory leaders might be in the woodwork. I mean, I think that if the Tory party was sensible, it would call a general election now. I hope Keir Starmer only got a minority government, a hung parliament, and give them a couple of years and they could come back, in which case they must look for a new leader, probably from a new generation. I can't see how Boris at the moment can make a comeback, given that MPs would have to be the final arbiters of him making that comeback. And there's no appetite in the current parliamentary party for that to happen.
Yeah, we say the current parliamentary party, but what if Boris sits out the next term, or a great part of the next term, as a newspaper columnist from the side, Benjamin, and then he can fulfil his own prophecy of riding back into battle on horseback, the brave saviour. Is that, you think, the future that he wants mapped out for himself?
Yeah, I was quite critical of Boris just a few seconds ago, but the one thing I will say for him is that he really does understand Brexit and also the existential element of delivering Brexit and preserving it. I don't think Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt and some of those people currently in the upper echelons of the Conservative Party quite understand how existential Brexit is for the Conservative Party going forwards. Boris really understood that. If you sell out to the people and a democracy on Brexit, they will punish you for it. And, you know, we've seen recently some manoeuvres from Rishi which have undone elements of Brexit, which I think will come back to bite him. Boris always understood that if he got everything else wrong, he had to get Brexit right. And so I think, you know, if we do see a betrayal on Brexit, there could be an avenue for him to come back.
OK, David, returning to you, you said that Express readers treat Boris as a hero. You must have been running some polling on this. What kind of a percentage of your readers are saying they would like to see Boris back?
We are actually currently running a poll. I haven't seen the final percentages, but it was let's put it like this, kind of around the 90s when I last saw it. But we'll get that final result later. He's they want him back, I think, and it will take a while. I think there's one issue that Nigel missed there, which is, yes, MPs get a say, but they get a say on the final two. It's the grassroots members who get a say on the final one, on the actual leader, and under the current rules anyway. And they overwhelmingly, from what I can see, want Boris, or they want somebody that Boris endorses. And that's going to be the issue for any leader going forward, anybody who wants to be leader going forward.
OK, it's a story that rumble on and on. David Maddox, Ben Loughnane and also, of course, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much for your input. You're watching and listening to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney. There's loads more coming up on today's show. AI may make it possible for the Fab Four to reunite for one final record, as Sir Paul McCartney says the technology could produce a new Beatles album. But is using AI to reconstruct singers beyond the grave an ethical dilemma? Stay tuned.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 1:30. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Here are the headlines. The King king has celebrated his official birthday with the nation during his first Trooping the Colour ceremony as monarch. Pomp and pageantry were on display during the traditional military parade, which dates back 260 years and involves the most prestigious regiments in the British Army. For the first time since 1989, all 5 regiments of Foot Guards, the Welsh, Scots, Irish, Coldstream and Grenadier, were on parade together, around 1,500 soldiers. And around 8,000 spectators surrounded Horse Guards to watch. King Charles has become the first monarch in more than 30 years to ride horseback during the Trooping the Colour parade. That's since Queen Elizabeth II did in 1986. Annual mortgage repayments are set to rise by nearly £3,000 for the average household remortgaging next year. That's according to the think tank Resolution Foundation, who says as the UK's mortgage crunch deepens, total annual mortgage repayments could rise by £15.8 billion by 2026. The man charged with the murders of the 3 victims of Nottingham's knife attacks has been remanded in custody. 31-year-old Valdo Kalakani, a former student of Nottingham University, is accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates on Tuesday. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 other people were injured when they were hit by a van that morning.
I made it to the top of Snowdon, and whatever you do, never give up.
A man with neurological condition has climbed the highest mountain in Wales to raise awareness of a disease. Ben Spencer lives with a progressive degenerative form of ataxia. It affects his speech, balance, coordination and swallowing. The 49-year-old said he was elated and emotional to have made it to the summit of Mount Snowdon and back down again in 16.5 hours. Fantastic, well done. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you for that update, Tamsin. Well, welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney, on your TV, online and your digital radio. A man has been charged with the murders of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in a knife attack in Nottingham. Valdo Kalakani has also been charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. We're joined now as GB News national reporter Ellie Costello. Hello, Ellie. What's the latest in Nottingham?
Well, Valdo Kalakani appeared in the dock in Nottingham Magistrates Court just after 10 a.m. this morning. He was wearing a grey T-shirt and grey joggers, and he was flanked by 3 security officers. And he stood and crossed his arms across his chest and gave his name as Adam Mendez, clearly an alias. He confirmed his date of birth and spoke only to do that and to confirm that he had no fixed address. He was not required to enter any plea to any of the charges, and he did show little to no emotion as the charges were read to him. He's accused of murdering first-year students Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, both 19 years old, in the early hours of Tuesday morning. He's also accused of murdering a school caretaker, Ian Coates. He's alleged also to have attempted to murder 3 pedestrians by driving at them with Ian Coates's stolen van. Well, Martin, Valdo Kalakani will now be remanded in custody and will appear at Nottingham Crown Court on Tuesday, the 20th of June. But meanwhile, in the city, tributes are continuing to pour into the 3 victims of Tuesday morning's attack. We've seen flowers, balloons, letters and candles being left in Old Market Square in the city, and similar scenes at the University of Nottingham campus as well, and many students there remarking that this is the most tragic way to end the academic year.
Okay, thank you, Ellie Costello, for that update from Nottingham. You're watching and listening to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Dorman. There's loads more coming up on today's show, including new policies in Italy. Could see cyclists there having to have insurance and number plates to drive on the roads. Would such a move work here in Blighty? And would it possibly bring an end to the drivers versus cyclists war on Britain's roads? All of that after these messages.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, The People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Dormley on your TV, online and of course on your digital radio. Now, fascinating story coming up next, because it seems that technology has made it possible for the music legend Sir Paul McCartney, Macca, a chance to recreate the final Beatles record. This week, Sir Paul explained how AI had been used to extricate John Lennon's voice from an old demo so he could complete the song that'll be released this year. When it comes to AI in music composition and creation, ethics and copyright come right into question. Well, join me now is the principal of the London College of Contemporary Music, Anthony Hamer-Hodges. Hello to you, Anthony. This is an absolutely fascinating story for me because, of course, we've seen before Free as a Bird came out in 1995, 25 years after the Beatles split. That was made from the same demo tape that's being used for the source of this latest song. Explain to us how they're lifting the vocals and how it'll be made into a song first, before we get onto the ethics.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on, Martin. Yeah, you're right that the track in question that they've brought to life is from the same era, the same sessions that John Lennon recorded a demo on his piano and guitar at home on a rudimentary boombox tape recorder of its time. And in the 90s, as you say, Free as a Bird and Real Love were recreated. And I think in those days, in the 90s, the technology didn't allow the kind of sound processing we've got now. And so they just layered up a lot of additional vocals, Paul, especially obviously on Real Love. And so John's voice was heard, but it wasn't to the fore. And then the technology that we saw used in the documentary film Get Back and in Paul McCartney's Glastonbury performance last summer, where he performed a duet with John Lennon. This was possible because they were able to lift the vocal completely out of the kind of muddy recording of the demo and synthesize it and improve it through these amazing technologies of machine learning, really training the computer to understand the frequencies it needs to identify and then enhancing what it's found, having separated it out from the background noise and the instruments. So amazing that now new tracks and full quality vocals can be heard from those early demos.
I think this is just absolutely fascinating. In fact, I think it's spine-tingling, to have the ability, using modern technology, just to pluck those vocals out. No doubt they can be improved, they can be clipped, because let's not forget, on a funny note, really, this song was rejected before by George Harrison because the vocals, it's fair to say, you can listen to this, by the way, it's on YouTube. You can actually go and listen to the song in question. I think it's called Now and Then. So you can hear the original track itself from a cassette, which, by the way, was given by Yoko Ono to Macca with an insignia on it that said, "For Paul." So they're going to take those vocals out. Presumably, they're going to do an arrangement, a new Beatles track. I think this is incredible.
Yeah, I agree. And the ethics that you referred to in this case, I don't think are, critical because, as you say, the track was already intended for Paul to be heard. It was an idea that John had for another song. Obviously, he was tragically killed in 1980, and Yoko Ono has consented for the work that's been done. So this is done fully with the consent of effectively all of the performers or their estates. I think where you get into the ethics of it is where people's voices or their contributions of the past are used either to train the machine learning to create new songs, completely new songs without attribution or credit or payment, or even worse, I think, a lot of recording artists are fearing that their voices are actually used to create versions of themselves that don't exist. Fake Drakes has been a very prominent example recently, where a song is very convincing, but it's not a song he's written, it's not a song he's performed, and yet it can be enjoyed by the masses. And I think that's where you get into the really sticky ethics.
Yeah, you really do, because, if you go to YouTube and you type in AI John Lennon, there's already a version of him singing Space Oddity. And what happened is the machine has learned Lennon's vocals, and then they can literally type out any words and have Lennon's voice reproduce those lyrics. That's going to be a massive headache for the lawyers moving forward, because ostensibly anybody could re-record any new song using any singer's voice without them having any control and whack it out. And are we looking again at a kind of replication of the great legal battles we saw when rap songs first started to sample things? But of course, that was an existing thing. This would be creating entirely new music without an artist's permission, dead or alive.
Yeah, you're right, and I think the sampling era is a very good example. And there's no easy answers. We teach at LTCM the philosophy of copyright and where artists can use it to protect their work and obviously make a living. But also the reasons that copyright exists in the first place is to incentivize future creativity. We believe that music is the highest form of human expression. It brings people together. It communicates in a way that transcends language, generations, boundaries and borders. But yeah, so if you want to incentivize future creativity, you've got to strike a balance between protecting the rights of the past and allowing the follow-on creativity. So if you have a new technology, for example, allows you or me to sing like John Lennon when we get on stage and do karaoke, is that something we want to stop? Is that something that should always require Yoko Ono's permission? Or or when new technologies come in the past, there's been debates in Parliament and then a compromise found where the creators of the past do get recognised and rewarded, but also it unlocks the potential of the new technologies. So sound recordings were controversial when they first came out. Radio, obviously, the record companies thought that no one would buy music if they could hear music on the radio. And then, as you say, with sampling, people were saying it's not real music, and I need my permission if you want to use my tracks. And there were big legal cases, but it also rejuvenated the careers of James Brown and George Clinton and all the soul and funk greats who ended up being the core repertoire that was used in hip hop.
And I wonder if this is going to be a further battlefront for legal case. We saw with Metallica when they took on Napster, one of the very early lawsuits about streaming, because, of course, file sharing was happening. Artists were getting no money, they were getting no credits. But with AI, this is the Pandora's box of the next level. I mean, even Macca himself said it's kind of scary but exciting because it's the future. So is the future of music, Anthony, machine-generated replicants of humans with no real control for the artists, and it's going to be an absolute bedlam? It's going to be the Wild West.
Well, that's obviously one of the concerns, and as I say, that balances need to be struck so that we do allow future creativity. That's the whole point of copyright law in the first place. But we reward and recognise the creators of the past. I'm very conscious, leading LCCM, that we want to make sure we're teaching to the future of the industry, not the past. But we can learn from the past in order to inform the future. And as we've pointed out, those battles, that Metallica phase, file sharing was presented in binary light, that it was either all good, the consumers obviously loved the bounty of music they could consume without payment, or all bad, the record companies and the artists like Metallica said it was doom and gloom. And I was told by a record company I had to take all the MP3s off my artist website because MP3 wasn't an approved format. And then eventually, Steve Jobs, Apple, created the iTunes store and digital music, and turns out people would pay for convenience. And I think that, music is art, so you want people to be creative. Music is business, so you want to be entrepreneurial and allow people to make money from their art. But music's, as a form of creativity, it's also done for personal fulfillment. And if people are happy and can be happy by creating music using classic voices of the past, again, can we find some balance so that great new music can be made, but always with permission, consent, and payment or recognition of the contributions that have gone into it.
OK, it's a fascinating debate. Anthony Hamer-Hodges, thank you for joining us on GB News this afternoon. What do you think out there? Because I remember when Free as a Bird came out, here we go, I was a bit sceptical, but actually I think it's a fantastic Beatles track. And what about the video? That video where they recreated moments from the Beatles' history, what could they do this time? They could even bring John Lennon back to life, like a hologram of John, making him move as an AI-generated John Lennon. I think it could be incredibly moving, spine-tingling, but a lot of people are thinking it's just not right. We shouldn't meddle with history. Let me know what you think. It's a fascinating topic, and you've already been getting in touch on Mark Carney's warning that Brexit is to blame for inflation. Barry says, the government did not take advantage of our new position in the world. Brexit is not to blame. Our government is. Barry, a lot of people are going to be agreeing with that. Did we miss key Brexit benefits on fishing, on Northern Ireland, on taxation? Virginia says, stop blaming Brexit for everything. The Remainers are all jumping for joy at getting rid of Boris, and they are not going to let go of getting back into the EU, which will ruin our country. Sandra says the following. Mark Carney needs to get back in his box as he is part of the problem we now have by not raising interest rates soon enough. Pretty damning indictment. Not many people there in Team Mark Carney. Keep your views coming in. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. We're, of course, at GB News. Now, to our next story. Cyclists in Italy will be made to have licence plates, indicators, insurance and wear helmets following a proposed law by its government. But do you think that would work here? Well, last summer, then Transport Secretary Grant Shapps almost broke the internet by suggesting cyclists could need number plates here in Blighty. And in a recent poll by The Mirror, that revealed that 71% of Brits think it's a sound idea. But joining me now is lawyer and senior associate at Slater and Gordon, and that's Nicholas Hadji Sava. Nicholas, thanks for joining us on the show. So it's a bit of a can of worms, this one. People seem to be very much in favour of it. Why should cyclists get away with jumping red lights? Why should they get away with banging into people and not being insured? But legally, is it even a non-runner? Could it ever happen?
Legally, it could happen. The usual questions as to whether or not there is a benefit in terms of risk management compared to the cost of putting forward this sort of policy is one that the government would need to take into account very carefully. There are obviously many benefits for cyclists for being insured and for being registered, because amongst other things, it will improve behaviours on the road. I think a lot of drivers these days, as you have said, tend to think that cyclists get away with acting differently on the road simply because they are less likely to be traced. And allowing for all road users to be treated in the same way is something that I'm sure is leaning the poll towards the 71%.
Nicholas House, a lot of cyclists seem to feel they have special dispensation to run amok on the King's Highway, cycle lanes taking over cities, but they ride with impunity, jump red lights, and of course there's a serious side to this because death by dangerous cycling only carries a maximum of 2 years imprisonment, and that was something that Grant Shapps wanted to overturn. So surely, if we're looking to live in an age of equality, this is a sound idea. We should all play by the same rules.
Yes, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would be suggesting that exact argument. If every road user is treated the same way in terms of their responsibilities as well as their rights on the road, then it may lead to safer practices across all road users. The costs, again, will be things that will need to be looked at in detail. And it's worth mentioning that, in fact, even now, there is cycle insurance available to those who wish to take it up. And it very much will depend on who the individuals are as we stand today. For rare road users, people who might take their bikes out by themselves or with families over the weekend, the cost of insurance, the need to register the bike probably will feel quite oppressive as we sit here today. But there are those who may choose to take up cycle insurance even from now if they are commuting on their bikes pretty much daily. It's a way of them managing the risks that they pose on the road compared to the risks that they face and the frequency that they face those risks.
OK, well, I think a lot of people out there won't be doing this. And if it's an option, it would need to be mandated. Of course, the pro-cyclist lobby would say it would deter people from cycling in the first place. And of course, the cost may fall on the taxpayer, because if you have a DVLA to monitor this, you'll need somebody to take care of it. And that, of course, would mean more public spending. But thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Nicholas Hadji Sava, for joining us. Thank you very much. Well, you're watching and listening to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney. Loads more coming up on the show this afternoon. We'll be getting all the latest on the government's migrant housing plans, including the PM's plan inadvertently leading to a bigger backlog of newer claims. But first, let's take a look at the weather with Rachel.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we have already seen some showers through this morning, and that's not going to change much as we go through the rest of this afternoon. And this is all due to this area of low pressure that's out to the west of the UK, bringing these occluded fronts across the UK. And these are a focus for some heavy showers and thunderstorms. So we'll continue to see thunderstorms and heavy showers across Northern Ireland, as well as Wales and southwest England through this evening. We will also see some heavier showers pushing into southeast England into the early hours of Sunday. It'll be quite a cloudy night though as well, with some low cloud, especially down North Sea coasts. And this will mean it's going to be another warm and humid night, though a little cooler than the night just gone. So as we go into the start of Sunday, and those showers are going to push northeastwards throughout the morning, but we will see further heavy showers and thunderstorms popping up through Sunday morning. So we do have a couple of weather warnings in force for this across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Temperature-wise though, tomorrow it'll be another warm day with temperatures getting into the low to mid-20s. But as we go into Sunday afternoon, we see this area of heavy showers and thunderstorms pushing up from the near continent. And this could bring thunderstorms to anyone within that yellow warning area across England and Wales, bringing some heavy rain, which could bring some localised flooding and disruption, as well as frequent lightning and hail. So do check the weather forecast if you're out Sunday evening. It will be quite a warm and muggy night, though, once again as we go into Monday morning with all that cloud and rain around. And that will push northwards through Monday, so quite a wet start across Scotland, drier elsewhere, with plenty of sunshine around to start the new week. But that unsettled weather not going too far, though showers may become a little bit more muted as we head towards midweek and remaining warm throughout.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Rebecca Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to GB News Saturday. I'm Martin Daubney, and for the next hour I'll be keeping you company on your television, online and your digital radio. I'll keep you up to date with the stories that really matter to you. Coming up in this final action-packed hour, the weather's getting warmer and the waters are getting calmer. Is the UK prepared to receive even more Channel migrants this summer? A major report says efforts to clear the asylum backlog aren't even working. What will Rishi do to respond? And British Sign Language is one step closer to being offered as a GCSE in schools in England, as the government has launched a consultation which will focus on the content of the new subject. But why has it taken so long? And we'll be looking back at a spectacular day in the capital as crowds celebrated King Charles's first trooping of the colour as king. But first, it's the news headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 2:01. The King has celebrated his official birthday with the nation during his first Trooping the Colour ceremony as monarch. Pomp and pageantry were on display during the traditional military parade, which dates back 260 years and involves the most prestigious regiments in the British Army. For the first time since 1989, all 5 regiments of Foot Guards, the Welsh, Scots, Irish, Coldstream and Grenadier, were on parade together, totalling around 1,500 soldiers, and around 8,000 spectators surrounded Horse Guards to watch. King Charles has become the first monarch in more than 30 years to ride horseback during the Trooping the Colour parade. That's since Queen Elizabeth II did so in 1986. Well, the King's birthday honours list has been released, with Davina McCall, Ken Bruce and Ian Wright among the famous faces to be listed. The joint oldest person ever to be honoured, 106-year-old Joan Willett from Sussex, is awarded a BEM for raising £60,000 for the British Heart Foundation during the pandemic. And the youngest person on the list, 18-year-old Junior J. Frood from Merseyside, received a BEM for campaigning against bullying, which he suffered from the age of 6 due to his love of dancing. To other news now, annual mortgage repayments are set to rise by nearly £3,000 for the average household remortgaging next year. That's according to the think tank Resolution Foundation, who says as the UK's mortgage crunch deepens, total annual mortgage repayments could rise by £15.8 billion by 2026. The man charged with the murders of the 3 victims of Nottingham's knife attacks has been remanded in custody. 31-year-old Valdo Kalakani, a former student of Nottingham University, is accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates on Tuesday. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 other people were injured when they were hit by a van that morning. GB News national reporter Ellie Costello was at Nottingham Magistrates Court.
Valdo Kalakani appeared in the dock at about 10 a.m. at Nottingham Magistrates Court wearing a grey T-shirt and grey jogging bottoms and spoke only to confirm his date of birth and to confirm the fact that he was of no fixed address. He didn't need to enter a plea to any of the charges, and he showed little to no emotion when those charges were read to him. Valdo Kalakani has now been remanded into custody and he will appear at Nottingham Crown Court on Tuesday, the 20th of June.
4 people from the same family have been found dead in a flat in West London. A 3-year-old boy, an 11-year-old girl and a man and woman in their 30s were found in the house on Staines Road in Hounslow yesterday afternoon. The Met Police says it's not seeking anyone else in connection with the incident. People are postponing their retirement plans because they don't have enough money due to the cost of living. That's according to Age UK. This comes after the Office for National Statistics indicated that more than 100,000 fewer people over 65 retired this year between February and April compared to the year before. The charity says many older people have a hard time paying bills because of inflation. Thousands of people will join a protest today in Sheffield to continue calls for an inquiry into one of the most violent clashes of the miners' strike 39 years ago. Police confronted pickets outside a coking plant in Orgreave, South Yorkshire, in 1984 in what the miners said was a military-styled operation to attack them. A campaign group claims there has been years of lies and cover-ups. Supermarket Asda's SPF 30 sunscreen has triumphed in testing, according to consumer testing website Which. The £3 sunscreen met all the UVA and UVB sun protection requirements. However, Avon's 3-in-1 face and body sun lotion SPF 30 was labelled as a don't buy product, as it did not hit its sun protection claim. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Martin.
And thank you very much, Tamsin, for that update. Well, let's get stuck now into today's topics. Former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney says Brexit is to blame for inflation. Mr. Carney says the soaring high rates were a result of leaving the European Union. In an interview with The Telegraph, he says he feels vindicated after predicting Brexit would lead to higher prices, a weaker pound and slower growth. Mr. Carney claimed he had warned the public that leaving the EU would damage the economy, but many branded him the architect of Project Fear during the battles over the UK's departure from the bloc. Well, joining me now to discuss this is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, here we have Mr. Project Fear turning into Mr. I Told You So.
Yes, indeed. I mean, certainly he's taking a lot of pleasure in the I told you so line. And I think that one has to actually look at exactly what he's been saying to The Telegraph. And he doesn't seem to be talking about inflation is all because of Brexit. He does admit that it's things like the war in Ukraine, the problem with supply lines following COVID. So he does accept there are other things going on. And obviously inflation is a global problem. It's affecting Western Europe too. It's affecting EU countries. So you can't blame it on Brexit. What you can do is blame some of it on Brexit. So if you take the London School of Economics survey, which they do every year, they reckon 8% of the 25% rise in food prices, that they put down to Brexit. So we would still be paying more for our food, but now we're paying a little bit more than we need to.
Yeah, so as you said, soaring inflation in the USA, in Italy, in Germany, in France, the Netherlands, Poland, Sweden, Spain, Australia. You get the picture. Is that because of Brexit too?
Well, obviously not. I mean, they're quite clearly that we've had so many different global catastrophes. It would be interesting to see what would have happened had they not taken place and had Brexit been allowed to run its course.
Yeah, but those things did take place, and yet Mr. Carney is singularly able to finger Brexit.
Well, he's fingering Brexit as part of the reason. I think that there were so many things that masked the effects of Brexit, and I think both good and bad. This was the problem that COVID actually did. So let's take an example of 16,000 EU lorry drivers left Britain following Brexit. Had COVID never happened, we would blame that on Brexit, and that would be the result of that was empty shelves in our supermarkets. What we don't know, of course, is whether they actually left because of Brexit and all the paperwork and the difficulties of doing their job.
Well, they left because there were no jobs.
Or they left because of COVID.
Well, they left because there were no jobs to do. I mean, so, and again,
they would have been with relatives during COVID. It could have been something as simple as that.
And you know, we talked about inflation being not exceptional to the United Kingdom. So were food shortages. There were food shortages in Germany, in America, and again, it wasn't because of Brexit. We had supply chain issues, we had a shortage of drivers, we had high costs of the pesticides, of the fertilisers, all of those aspects. And yet, and here's back to the central point about Mark Carney, if an asteroid hit the Earth, he blamed Brexit.
Yeah, I feel that's probably going a little far, actually. But, I mean, when we come down to Brexit, do you think it's been an unmitigated success, or do you accept there has been a cost of Brexit and we are that little bit worse off because of it?
I would say that we didn't implement Brexit correctly or with enough teeth, because we had a government that gave us a watered-down version. For example, on fishing, we never really took back control of our waters. We've surrendered waters to the EU, especially France. In fact, we're now advertising for cut-price fishermen, because €24,000, because we can't afford to pay British fishermen enough to go out there. That's one thing. On Northern Ireland, we annexed it away. On independent tax status, such as corporation status, we could have gone the way of the Republic of Ireland or Cyprus and slashed our base rate. But the level level playing field tied us to the EU's bloc, as did being tied to their laws. So what I don't accept is that we got a proper Brexit, and I think therefore with the overlay of the pandemic, with the overlay of the war in Ukraine, we have a muddying of the waters, which doesn't even allow us to quantify the impact or the benefits or the losses of Brexit. And yet, whenever there's a bad news story, people like Carney blame it on Brexit.
Well, I mean, certainly, Mark Carney got it wrong about the fact that house prices would drop by 30%, for instance, was one of the effects of Brexit, that Britain would go into recession. We're avoiding it. Germany, interestingly, isn't. So I take all that on board. Equally, I do also take on board that there are things like food prices which are more expensive because of Brexit, that imports and exports have suffered because of Brexit.
But food inflation at the moment is worse in Germany, it's worse in Sweden than it is in the UK. Is that because of
the
Brexit?
argument is that the percentage of it that we could actually put down to Brexit. So if you take the 25% that food has gone up, so a quarter in price since 2019, what the London School of Economics reckon is 8% can be directly attributed to
but have the LSE ever put out a pro-Brexit report?
Well,
I mean, come on, Nigel.
Well,
they're rarer than hen's teeth. Brexit report from the LSE.
The danger there is actually criticising someone's report. They've been doing this every year, and last year I think they saw food prices at 6%. But then you take, say, for instance, the Resolution Foundation. They also came out with a report, and what they said was wages would probably be about £470 on average a year lower come 2030 because of Brexit. And my point all the way along the line is not that Brexit was wrong if you voted for British sovereignty, but that it came at a cost. And it's not a huge cost, but we all have to pay for it, that it wasn't the great unmitigated economic success that everyone assumed.
But in terms of wages, one of the central foundation stones of Brexit was let's stop being reliant on cheap imported foreign labour. And let's actually pay British workers a fair wage. But the farming industry, the supermarket industry, hospitality became addicted to cheap labour. And that's why they were so in favour of maintaining the status quo. The status quo was hammering the working classes, the lorry drivers you mentioned, who couldn't compete. They weren't on a level playing field in terms of the shifts they were allowed to work. The farmers who were driven, they had their wages suppressed. We're digressing. Back to Carney.
But you are supporting Labour policy for stopping people who bring in migrant labour from being able to pay them 20% less. If you stop that, you would get British jobs for British workers.
But I remember the days when the Labour Party stuck up for better wages for British workers. Those days, I think, are gone. They'd now rather import cheaper labour. Let's have one more point on Mark Carney. Isn't part of the reason that inflation is soaring is that the Bank of England printed tons of money when he was in charge?
That didn't help either. And I do take the point that the one thing about inflation is you've got to take money out of the economy, not pump it into it. So, yes, that had an inflationary effect. It would be even more inflationary to go along with Tory policy and try and or some Tory policy and try and cut taxes at the moment.
OK, well, as you can no doubt imagine, Nigel, this has been getting people going in GB Newsland, and you've been getting in touch on this topic in your droves. Here's a few of those choice comments with the expletives removed, I hope. This one is from Shane. As long as we have open borders, the quality of life and GDP per person will continue to drop. Brexit should have stopped this in 2016, so in reality, we don't have Brexit. Shane's got a good point there. Margaret has this point. So Brexit is to blame for inflation in the UK. Then what is behind the inflation experience in the US and other countries? Great point, Margaret. One I made myself. Rachel says this. It is true that we should all accept there will be some cost to acquire sovereignty, but this is too much. We are isolated and our country is worse off for it. And Rachel makes a good point there for the Remain side of things, because on GB News we like to keep things balanced. We'll keep your views coming in on that and all other topics. And, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. We're, of course, at GB News. OK, to our next story now, our big debate. You're going to enjoy this one. It will get feisty. There's been a major setback to Rishi Sunak's plans to tackle the migrant crisis. A recent report says efforts to clear the asylum backlog aren't working. And in fact, their attempts have made the situation much worse. Viewers on GB News can see pictures now of more migrants arriving in Dover this morning. The National Audit Office says that by focusing on people who have been waiting for a decision for a long time, it has inadvertently led to a bigger backlog of newer claims. Well, joining me now is international security and border control expert Henry Bolton, international human rights lawyer David Hay, and still with us, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. I'm going to start with you, Henry. Let's just look at Rishi Sunak's week. We can all agree he's had a bit of a howler. There's a record number of backlogs. He spent 3.6 billion pounds on clearing this backlog, which has made things worse. There's some 9,436 across the channel illegally this year, including at least 1,500 this week. Let's face it, the lunatics have taken over our asylum system.
Indeed, Martin. And look, you know, you've come up with a few points there, but 154 unaccompanied children who have been in hotels have gone missing. There are all sorts of, you know, Suella Braverman couldn't tell us how many of the 12,000 Albanians that should be returned have been returned, despite the fact that we've now got an agreement with Albania. You know, only 0.4% of those people who have been determined not to have any cause to be in the UK have been returned. So, you know, the whole thing is a mess. And what is lacking in this entire story is an overarching strategy, a series of strategic national objectives that are laid down by the Cabinet, and then agencies have to pull into that. There is no strategy. I've helped 14 countries to develop national border strategies to try and deal with these sort of things, in the main highly successfully. The problem here is that we've got no coherence. So we've got a whole series of ad hoc, standalone headline promises which actually can't be achieved. As you've just quite rightly outlined some of them, and I think from the National Audit Office has come out with those. So there's a real need for a far more strategic overview with a realistic set of objectives that actually can be made to work. Without that, coherence cannot occur.
OK, David Hay, cutting to you now, human rights lawyer. A lot of people would be blaming people like you for slowing down the system. I know that's not true. You're a very balanced individual, but there is now this set too, isn't there? There's a feeling of exacerbation that we've completely lost controls, and there's a feeling that the civil service, the legal system, isn't in favour of keeping our borders safe at all.
Well, absolutely. Good afternoon. I think, as you said, I think completely lost control of the immigration system. They've already admitted it's broken, and they're breaking it more and more every day. I mean, the last time we talked, Martin, you said that it is Groundhog Day. We're here yet again with another policy announcement, seeing, you know, Rishi Sunak in a stab vest, you know, declaring all sorts of positive, you know, facades about immigration. And the reality is, he's not protecting British borders, and the genuine people that need their human rights protected, the genuine asylum seekers, are not being protected either. And the worrying thing is that we could have another year and a half of this. Or, you know, even recently we saw Braverman before the Home Affairs Select Committee talking about sex trafficking and talking about the fact that you know, genuine victims are likely to get deported. So, you know, we already know that all these things that are going through are going to get stuck in courts. There's a limited time left, and the numbers are getting worse and worse and worse. And the solution that apparently they call a solution, the Conservative Party, won't work. So something needs to be done, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, I want to bring you in now, Nigel, as somebody from the political left. If we think things are bad now, what are they going to be like under a Labour Party, under a Labour government? Because Yvette Cooper is very fond, the Shadow Home Secretary, of holding up a refugees welcome sign. A lot of Labour MPs have written letters to the Prime Minister to help ground flights with convicted Jamaican criminals on, some of whom went on to murder in Britain. If the Labour Party get in, it's going to get worse, isn't it, Nigel?
Oh, I don't see why it should. At least they've got some kind of ideas. And I agree with everything that's just been said. Our real problem is the immigration system's in a mess. We need an overall policy to be able to deal with it, and we haven't got one. Labour equally has not gone as far as I'd like to see them go, but they are talking about getting the returns agreements back with European countries, similar to the one we have with Albania, and the ones we lost through Brexit. Now, if you can actually return people to France who made an asylum claim there, if we could do that again, that's going to help, and to other European countries. ultimately, the only way it's going to really work, and Labour haven't specified how they're going to do this, is to have proper settlement schemes, which means that people don't have to claim asylum on British land. If we can avoid that, we take away the impetus for crossing the Channel.
Henry, let's cut to you now. I can hear you champing at the bit there. Isn't it just time to... Look, we keep hearing all these wishy-washy things about asylum changes to the system here or there. Isn't it time to go for the nuclear option? What about declaring a state of emergency? You know, they did it. Giorgia Meloni did that in Italy. They closed their borders to all illegals. Is it time to go down that route?
I don't think we're quite there yet, Martin. I know that would be amongst some people that would be a popular thing, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. And, you know, the problem is something that everybody wants to have a silver bullet. You know, it's a barge, Rwanda, or it's stop them in the Channel and push them back. But actually, this has got an international dimension of almost global scale. It's got a regional dimension, the continent of Europe, and it's got a dimension on our borders and in the interior. And you need approaches to deal with all of those, because we should rightly allow some people in. And that's been talked about, the Ukrainians, the Hong Kong Chinese, some of the family reunification people and so on. There's a range of people that we do want to let in. What we've got to do is put in place a system that protects our borders, projecting beyond them, operating on them and in the interior, that deals not only with immigration effectively, but other things, such as the cocaine and heroin that comes into this country. It's all imported. 97% of the illegal firearms in this country are imported across our borders. You mentioned fishing in an earlier piece that I heard. Fishing actually is governed largely by our territorial waters and their borders. So, you know, all of this should be under one overarching thing that brings all government agencies and departments relevant to bear. There's probably about 12, 14 of them, depending how you measure it. We're putting everything into the Home Office. It's simply not going to function that way. And just one other thing, if I may, Martin, very briefly. We have got about 168 different local authorities who are responsible for employing people and managing staff at various border-related facilities, whether they're inland truck terminals or whether they're local ports and so on. It's simply impossible to have anything functioning on our borders when you've got that sort of disparate approach to managing.
I have to bring David Hay in here now for a legal take on all of this. So, David, there is a feeling that if people make it to the United Kingdom, they make it on a dinghy, that they're more or less home and dry. They'll be put up in a hotel, and they'll have their lifestyles paid for, and then the attempts to return anybody are completely stymied, not only by a backlog, but also our membership of the ECHR, which effectively places the human rights of somebody who's come here above our right to deport them. What would your take be on a referendum to leave the ECHR, and where would that leave us legally?
I mean, as a human rights lawyer, I wouldn't be in favour of leaving the ECHR, not just about immigration and asylum seekers, but for other reasons as well. You know, and I don't think that we would see a referendum. I think that that's not something that we will see, and I wouldn't be in favour of that. But, you know, if we did leave the ECHR, I still don't think that that is going to clear the problems. The problems are things like the backlog, the number of people in the system, the time it takes to actually process applications. And then when we look at the statements of the government that say that going forward, when the new law comes into place, that they expect to be able to process claims within days, when they still can't manage it in years, that's not going to happen. So the system is hopeless. And I don't think ECHR is the main problem. Admittedly, it does cause some problems and delays, but it's not the main one.
The main problem, if I may just come in there, is leadership. It's lack of political will to solve this range of problems, and it's probably lack of grasp as to the range of problems that are there and how they connect together. If there was the will, the determination, the ability, the willingness to engage with all parts of this conversation, have a frank and rational, comprehensive conversation, and bring in all elements of government and say, I want this done, I want it resourced, it needs to happen, but do it realistically, then I think we might make some progress.
OK, we'll have a cool time there. Gentlemen, a superb debate. Thanks for your input. Henry Bolton, David Hay, and, of course, Nigel Nelson here in the studio. And please get in touch with your opinions on that feisty topic. You're watching and listening to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney. There's loads more coming up on today's show, including we'll have the latest on the King's birthday honours as he unveils those who have given the most to Britain this past year. But first, let's take a look at the weather with Rachel.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we have already seen some showers through this morning and that's not going to change much as we go through the rest of this afternoon. And this is all due to this area of low pressure that's out to the west of the UK, bringing these occluded fronts across the UK. And these are a focus for some heavy showers and thunderstorms. So we'll continue to see thunderstorms and heavy showers across Northern Ireland, as well as Wales and southwest England through this evening. We will also see some heavier showers pushing into southeast England into the early hours of Sunday. It'll be quite a cloudy night though as well, with some low cloud, especially down North Sea coasts. And this will mean it's going to be another warm and humid night, though a little cooler than the night just gone. So as we go into the start of Sunday, and those showers are going to push northeastwards throughout the morning, but we will see further heavy showers and thunderstorms popping up through Sunday morning. So we do have a couple of weather warnings in force for this across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Temperature-wise though, tomorrow it'll be another warm day with temperatures getting into the low to mid-20s. But as we go into Sunday afternoon, we see this area of heavy showers and thunderstorms pushing up from the near continent. And this could bring thunderstorms to anyone within that yellow warning area across England and Wales, bringing some heavy rain, which could bring some localised flooding and disruption, as well as frequent lightning and hail. So do check the weather forecast if you're out Sunday evening. It will be quite a warm and muggy night, though, once again as we go into Monday morning with all that cloud and rain around. And that will push northwards through Monday, so quite a wet start across Scotland, drier elsewhere, with plenty of sunshine around to start the new week. But that unsettled weather not going too far. Those showers may become a little bit more muted as we head towards midweek and remaining warm throughout.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 2:30. Here are the headlines. The King has celebrated his official birthday with the nation during his first Trooping the Colour ceremony as monarch. Pomp and pageantry were on display during the traditional military parade, which dates back 260 years and involves the most prestigious regiments in the British Army. For the first time since 1989, all 5 regiments of Foot Guards, the Welsh, Scots, Irish, Coldstream and Grenadier were on parade together. Around 1,500 soldiers in total and around 8,000 spectators surrounded Horse Guards to watch. King Charles has become the first monarch in more than 30 years to ride horseback during the Trooping the Colour parade since the Queen Elizabeth II, who did so in 1986. Well, members of the royal family then waved from Buckingham Palace balcony as thousands filled the mall to cheer. 70 aircraft from all 3 armed services took part in the flypast. 18 Typhoon fighters spelt out the King's monogram CR for Charles Rex. Spitfires, Hurricanes and a Lancaster bomber also graced the skies over London, all from the Battle of Britain memorial flight. The Red Arrows provided the ultimate finale to the occasion, trailing their signature red, white and blue smoke. To other news now, annual mortgage repayments are set to rise by nearly £3,000 for the average household remortgaging next year. That's according to the think tank Resolution Foundation, who says as the UK's mortgage crunch deepens, total annual mortgage repayments could rise by £15.8 billion by 2026. The man charged with the murders of the 3 victims of Nottingham's knife attacks has been remanded in custody. 31-year-old Valdo Kalakani, a former student of Nottingham University, is accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates on Tuesday. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 other people were injured when they were hit by a van that morning. Well, you can get more on all of these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you very much for that update, Tamsin. Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney, on your TV, online and on your digital radio. Well, the King's first official birthday honours list has been announced, marking the incredible public service of individuals from across the UK. Over 1,000 recipients have been awarded for their outstanding contributions to society. Lisa Hartle went to meet some of those who have been recognised.
Celebrating the inspirational people who have strived to combat major challenges of our time. Gathered in central London, these are just a few of those who've been awarded in the King's Birthday Honours for their extraordinary work, which has had a positive impact on society. Suzanne Richards from the West Midlands has received an MBE after setting up a charity for families who've lost loved ones in traumatic circumstances. She set up Smile for Joel after losing one of her sons, her dad and her brother in the 2015 Tunisia terror attacks.
And what does it mean to you to receive this award?
It's just an honour. You know, I said when I received it, I felt that, you know, this is for my dad and for my brother and for Joel as well. They'd be so pleased and so proud of me for what I've done. But I'll share it with Owen as well, because Owen was a co-founder with me setting up the charity. And just thank you to everyone that helps. I don't do it on my own. I have a lot of support from trustees, family and friends. So yeah, it definitely is a big thank you to the community as well.
18-year-old Junior J. Frood has been awarded a BEM for his services to vulnerable children. He was bullied from 6 years old for his passion for dancing, now dancing with the likes of Justin Bieber. Over the last 8 years, he's been an anti-bullying campaigner and raised over £300,000 for good causes through performing.
I felt really excited. I was really grateful as well because, like, all the work that I've done, it shows like it's not going unnoticed and my voice is being heard, and it's really grateful to know like it's all paying off, all the hard work and all the work that I've done for other people, and it was just really nice to receive it. I'm really, really grateful. I help people through anti-bullying work that I do, so I go speak to in schools, I have my hashtag on social media, I also fundraise for various charities and like do that through dancing and busking and dancing at events and just all that stuff. So it's just really nice to help people and see their reactions and how my work helps them and makes them smile, because all I want to do is put a smile on people's faces.
Roisin Marshall has been awarded an OBE for developing schools to enable Protestant and Catholic children to be educated together in Northern Ireland.
I'm really, really honoured, particularly for my work in education in Northern Ireland and around community relations. Since the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago, we have actually begun to make peace, and we aren't killing each other anymore, which is fantastic. But we're now beginning to build peace, and to me, part of the answer in building peace is developing relationships between children and young people and their families from a very young age through education.
Well-known recipients include Davina McCall for her career as a broadcaster and campaigner, actress Vicky McClure for her dementia awareness campaigning, and footballer turned pundit Ian Wright for services to charity and association football. 1,171 people have received an award, celebrating the extraordinary things each of them are doing. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
What a fantastic package. The very best of British, and well done, all of you. OK, you've been getting in touch on our big topic of the day, and of course, that's Mark Carney on Brexit. Jeff says the following: I don't care if food prices do go up due to Brexit. It's a small price to pay for getting away from that clown show known as the EU. Jeff, let me tell you this. I saw it up close and personal as an MEP, and it was worse. It was worse than you possibly could imagine. It really was, I think, an absolute clown show. Totally agree. Judy says the following: I very much agree with one of your previous viewers. It's good to see you're feeding back on what other people are saying, Judy. Well done. Have a blue ribbon. Brexit not working properly is the fault of a very poor Tory government who are useless. COVID didn't help as it slowed things up dramatically. Great point, Judy, because Carney seems to single-handedly be blaming all of the bad stuff on Brexit without talking about the fact there have been lots of other factors, including actually him printing a shed load of money. Misses that one out, doesn't he? It's all Brexit and never down to him. Andy says the following: the only reason Brexit failed is down to Remainers of all parties who didn't believe in the results of the democratic vote. Andy, I concur. That was the reason that I went and became an MEP and stood and got elected. It was that democracy had to be listened to. Do not ignore the electorate. Do so at your peril. And all these years later, they're still being penalised for the democratic choice. Well, keep those views coming in. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and please follow us on Twitter. We're, of course, at GB News. You're watching and listening to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney. Loads more coming up still on today's show, including the government launched a 12-week consultation looking into teaching British Sign Language in schools. A welcome step forward for Britain's deaf, but why has it taken so long to happen? All of that right after these messages.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling
the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney, on your TV, online and of course on your digital radio. Now, British Sign Language is one step closer to the classroom. This week, the government launched a 12-week consultation looking into the content that should be included in the qualification. If approved, students in schools will be taught to communicate effectively with other signers for use in work, social and academic settings, providing them with valuable life skills welcomed by employers. Well, joining me now is policy analyst at the National Deaf Children's Society, Simon Want. Simon, this seems like a fabulous move, but why has it taken so long?
Well, campaigners have been calling for GCSE in British Sign Language for more than a decade. So, you know, we have to say this is really a momentous step forward for breaking down barriers in communication for the deaf community. This is a campaign that has been going on for a long time. The National Deaf Children's Society had a campaign back in 2017, which was the Right to Sign campaign. And in 2018, the government agreed to start drafting some subject content and agreed to introduce the GCSE in principle. So it really has been a long time coming. Obviously, there's been delays to the global pandemic and things like that as well. But, you know, British Sign Language is a beautiful, rich, wonderful language. It's legally recognised as well under the British Sign Language Act, which went through Parliament last year. And everyone that I meet says, I'd love to have the opportunity to learn British Sign Language, you know. And we're just so pleased that we're moving closer and closer to seeing a British Sign Language GCSE being taught in the classroom in schools.
I think it's a brilliant idea. My kids, my boy is now 14, my girl is 9, and when they used to come back from primary school and they would do some signing, I found it really, really moving. It's not only if they choose to take this as a qualification, but kind of normalising this as a way of communication, treating people with equality. It's a brilliant thing for kids to be learning about.
You're absolutely right. Yes, we know, you know, that there's a lot of interest. A lot of people want to learn it, especially having seen lots of deaf role models on the television. Rose Ayling-Ellis, for example, that's kind of ignited a little bit more interest, I suppose, in the language, which is great. And we know that British Sign Language is the first or preferred language of many deaf children in the UK. But we also know from a lot of the surveys that we've done and research that we've done internally that many hearing children are interested in learning British Sign Language too. So there's absolutely no doubt that the GCSE will raise the profile of British Sign Language and of deafness, but our hope is that also alongside that, it will promote a greater understanding of the barriers that deaf children face in schools, raising more deaf awareness, because after all, breaking down those barriers is absolutely key to making sure that the deaf community, but especially deaf children and young people, don't get left behind.
And of course, Simon, as well as being an incredibly worthwhile and just phenomenally interesting thing to learn about, this could give people the edge in the job market, couldn't it? So talk to us about some of the career opportunities that people may benefit from if they choose this qualification.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we know that there's a shortage of interpreters, British Sign Language interpreters, for example. So, there's definitely a market there that could be filled. We also know that, we support the premise that this course would be taught predominantly by deaf people as well. So, there's an opportunity there for people to go into teaching with the idea that, this could be a course that they could potentially take on and deliver. So this really does open up lots of avenues, lots of jobs. And British Sign Language it's a native British language. It's used by tens of thousands of people. And from our perspective as well, it's only fair and right that British Sign Language users should have the opportunity to get a GCSE in their own legally recognised language. I mean, after all, you can study German, you can study French. Why not study British Sign Language?
Simon wants hear. I completely agree. What a brilliant story. And also, it was very moving during the pandemic when we saw so many deaf children falling behind because of masks in classrooms or not being able to use their ability to lip read. I think this is brilliant. Thank you very much for your work. Fantastic story. OK, let's move on now. With temperatures continuing to rise across the UK, many of us are, of course, choosing to cool off in the water. However, with over 250 cases of drowning every year and recent high-profile tragedies, campaigners are urging the public to consider the dangers. Our South East of England reporter, Ray Addison, has this report.
The last 2 weeks, we have seen probably over 16 tragedies. That can't continue. We are just at the beginning of getting the hot weather. It's going to be a horrific summer if this is the start. That's all I can think.
Becky Ramsey understands the danger of open water swimming. In 2011, she lost her 13-year-old son Dylan in a tragic drowning accident.
Just like any normal teenager, decided on a whim that it was hot and he wanted to cool down. So him and a couple of friends decided to go to the local disused quarry.
Although Dylan had been a strong swimmer, Becky believes he didn't understand the risks of open water.
These young people are not being told that you can't just go out and do this in any body of open water without this specialist equipment or specialist training or a lifeguard on hand or supervision.
For over a decade, Becky's been calling on the government to improve water safety education in schools and feels a lack of action has led to needless deaths.
So for 12 years I've been banging my head against a brick wall, and you know what, enough's enough. The only thing that we can do to prevent these tragedies, in my opinion, is to have water safety taught on the national curriculum, age appropriate, right from very, very young, right into colleges and universities.
Ashley Jones is Swim England's water safety and drowning prevention manager. He agrees that more education is needed.
We're currently supporting a bill through the House of Lords to increase the amount of water safety education that takes place within school. So it puts it on an equal footing with things like fire safety, because we recognise that water safety is just as important.
Here in Brighton, the new Sea Lanes Outdoor Swimming Centre offers classes designed to help people transition safely to open water.
Look at the tide times, know what the tides are doing, understanding good times to go into the water. When you go into the sea, find your entry and exit points, look where you're going in, look where you need to come out again. Understanding your own body, you know, don't measure yourself off someone else's ruler. Know when you're getting cold, if your hands and feet start to get cold, that's when really you need to get out. Having some warm clothes to get into when you get out, and don't stay in the sea for longer than necessary. Only stay in there for a certain amount of time and build up gradually.
Dylan's mum believes every life saved saves a family from a lifetime of heartache, and she has a message for young people wanting to cool off this summer.
Nobody's here to stop your fun. Go to the beach, but go to a lifeguarded beach and swim between the red and yellow flags. You know, then a lifeguard's watching you at least. There is at least a chance that you will make it home.
Ray Addison, GB News.
A very moving package that every parent should listen to. I totally agree with Becky. You need to have a conversation with our kids, because even during a heat wave, the water can be as cold as a fridge. It's a whole different world, so let's keep our kids safe. OK. A celebration fit for a king. Charles III has marked his first official birthday with a military spectacle full of pomp and pageantry. Thousands of well-wishers flanked the Mall as King Charles became the first monarch in decades to ride on horseback, followed by members of the royal family in a carriage, before gathering on the Buckingham Palace balcony to enjoy a flypast. Well, joining me now is our senior royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who was there all day. Cameron, first of all, I've got to say, fantastic broadcast.
Oh, thank you.
Particularly when the aircraft were going overhead and you were giving us a full rundown of every craft. And as a geek to me, that was epic. But just give us an overall flavour of today. It seemed to go without... It was a 10 out of 10.
I think so. This was Britain at its best, wasn't it? It was the pomp, it was the pageantry, clearly the military who are on display, 1,400 soldiers, 300 horses and 400 musicians were clearly very well rehearsed. There were no fainters, as some people were slightly concerned about due to the rehearsals last week. It wasn't too hot. And it was the first time, of course, we have had a King's birthday parade in 70 years. The first time a serving monarch had ridden on a horse down the Mall to Trooping the Colour since 1986. So that was the last time the late Queen Elizabeth II did it on her beloved horse, Burmese, and the King was accompanied by the Princess Royal, his son, the Prince of Wales, and his brother, the Duke of Edinburgh as well. And of course, we had the charming Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis in the carriage, and the Princess of Wales and the Queen as well. So it was a spectacular day. And
there's a very amusing picture you showed us. Once again, Prince Louis has a very great ability to steal the show.
Yeah, he does. So, well, some people are saying this is a sneeze. Others are saying that it is very much him holding his nose, not enjoying the smell from the horse poo or the horse waste that was on the parade ground. I'll leave it up to the viewers and listeners to make up their own mind on that one. But even on the balcony, he was pulling faces, he was giving salutes, he was really clearly enjoying the moment. But, I mean, he's only 5 years old, so I think perhaps we can cut him some slack here. Although he is a member of the royal family, he's still a young boy and still a kid at heart.
Yeah.
But I think it definitely warms people's hearts across the country.
And King Charles, as you said, the first monarch in a long time to go on horseback. He had to do a bit of work at the end there when he was taking the royal salute. He had to control his horse.
Yes, he certainly did. And at one point, one of the grooms had to run out and try and control his horse as well. I think he was maybe a little bit frisky in the heat, the horse that the king was riding. He was meant to be right in the centre of the centre gate of Buckingham Palace, but the horse kind of went sideways, and then the groom had to push his backside round to make him face the soldiers who were marching past. But the king, clearly very experienced at riding a horse, I think, you know, kind of was fine with this. And
yeah, there it is now. You can see, look, the horse is just trying to shimmy sideways. And Charles, to be fair, he brought that beast under control. Very impressive. Very impressive. But that was a minor moment in what really was an epically tight, fantastically organised day.
Absolutely. And just after this, of course, we had this spectacular fly past, 70 aircraft, an extended fly past from the Royal Navy, Royal Air Force and British Army as well. Some of the aircraft formed the letters CR in the sky, Charles Rex, Charles King in Latin. So it really was spectacular. And the Battle of Britain Memorial flight. And because 6 weeks ago, you know, six weeks ago was the coronation, very small fly past because of bad weather. It's great that it was made up for today.
It's been an absolutely epic day. Thank you so much, Cameron Walker, for being our eyes and ears on the ground. You had a ringside seat at Buckingham Palace. An epic crowd was out there. Thank you so much for that. OK, you've been watching and listening to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Dorby. Thank you so much for joining me today. But don't go anywhere, though, because Nana's up next.
Hey, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from